Hey, what's up, guys? Can everybody hear me? I think I just had my mic turned off for a few seconds. Rookie mistake. Dig Akshay, welcome. Give me a shout in the chat. Let me know you guys can hear everything okay. While I'm going through, before I get started, what's up? Brian, what's going on, man? You guys hear me? Okay, great. So before I get started today, I want to say hello. Hope you guys are all doing great. Thanks for tuning in. I'm going to drop a ZBC thread that I've been starting to put together for this stream that's got just all the stream graphics as well as the links to the streams themselves. So the builds from previous streams that I have done months ago and have come back since to try and finish up this project. So these are all here on ZBC. If you guys want to check it out, it'd be awesome if you guys, give me some feedback. Somebody requested it was actually Brian who was here. I don't know if you saw this, Brian. I did post my custom UI and I posted the hotkeys and some notes. So if anybody has questions about my UI and stuff, you guys can hit me up here. Follow me on ZBC. You can always communicate with this particular thread. But that stuff is there. There's a Dropbox file that you can download. Ashke, I'm great. Brian, cool, man. You saw it. Awesome. I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well. And, I'm actually feeling very rested today. I don't know. Hopefully you guys are doing well through this crazy lockdown. I had to cut my hair recently with a beard trimmer. That was fun. Otherwise, this has pretty much been my life. Of course, we got a lot of streams. Oh, actually, on that topic, since we have done some stuff recently with Pixologic, I want to show you, we did have another ZBrush master stream. Most of you guys are loyal ZBrush live followers, so I'm sure that you saw this. If you haven't seen this, we did another ZBrush master stream with Vichar BN. And let me see if I can get you the link to this. Oh, actually, I think I need to go back to the top. This one right here is actually on the top banner of ZBC. I'm going to paste this for you guys. Yeah, lockdown is going crazy. I totally feel you on that. Hopefully this will help. This was an amazing stream. Vichar showed some incredible work and also gave some really invaluable tips and information on sculpting. So if you haven't seen this, give it a watch. It's a little bit over an hour or so. We probably went for about an hour and a half. Yeah, we got to stay safe, keep working. These ZBrush Master streams should be entertaining at the very least and very informative, so check it out. Today, I'm going to pick up from where I left off a couple weeks ago, which is here's just an updated build of kind of where I want to go. And I left off last week about here. So we got through actually getting the shelling. If you didn't watch, I went through techniques on actually creating interior shells using Booleans to create a nice clean interior for this vehicle. And if you check out that first link I sent in the chat, that's got basically all the parts of this scene that I'm working on. So I got my images over here. Thanks, Richard. So then what I want to do is this focus of these last few streams have been more sort of on the hard surface-ish organic sort of build. So I started originally with kind of working through making the Luigi character. And I want to do a full scene eventually. So my goal is to do this ZBrush mashups with Gaff and Luigi and actually have sort of like a scene in the rain with the vehicle. So needing the vehicle, this is where I'm at. And I want to do a mashup between the Bladerunner style and the stylized Mario Kart theme. So that's kind of where I've been at. And it's been pretty fun so far. Honestly, I think you guys tell me if you have any thoughts, critiques, or ideas. I'm always open to it. I'm kind of working this out as I go, so shame on me. I'm not actually doing much concepting here. I'm kind of just like mashing up the different elements. So, for example, what I want to get to today is some of the more detailed stuff, getting cut lines, getting into some more modeling elements of like getting the engine sort of built. And I am referencing to, I want to make sure that I reference all of the artwork and the artists that I'm looking at. So going into Bladerunner, I'm just going to pull up this concept. I want to make sure I keep showing this on my stream because this is something I like a lot of these shapes, and I want to try and keep some of these and maybe simplify. So this is George Hull. He did work for Bladerunner 2049, which It sucks that I can't play audio during the streams because I would just be playing Bladerunner soundtrack the whole time. But I'm stuck to, you guys have to listen to me talk. So I want to get to this stuff here. All right. So then going back to where we left off last week. Actually, let me make sure I close Windows Photo Viewer because sometimes that thing just bogs down Windows lately. I don't know what's going on with that. So then getting into the build stuff, I think I'm going to go in and I'm going to split out this piece here. I'm not sure if I'm digging this back panel. This back panel seems a little extra. Like the build that I'm working on that I started this morning, going through and getting all these extra details in here. I'm thinking I kind of like the simplicity of this without the extra stuff. But taking a look at just some of the reference elements, like I really want to take this now. So I got the clean shell, but this is where I really need to add in those details. So all that engine component, those engine components, I want those to have a space to live in. I also have like an additional sort of section in there that I want to start to like subtract and create just a little bit more of the underbody inside of this shell. So actually getting some cuts and then getting some panel line cuts going as well. And then I need to actually really go in and fill in the front sort of engine components where there should be a lot of stuff in here. Saeed, I'm great. How are you? Thank you for asking. I'm doing really well today. I got my tea. Got a few hours to dedicate to building in ZBrush. Really can't go wrong with that. All right, guys. So to get started, I think I'm going to do a couple more quick tricks from the last stream. So I need to get a couple more shapes. If you didn't, again, going back to that link, I'll post this one more time before I get moving. This link to my ZBC account would be awesome if you guys follow me so I can follow you. This has the full breakdown and all the previous streams. So if you go back to the previous ones, the wheel, actually I haven't updated this. You know what I need to give you guys is, this is my presenters page. Let's see if that's up there. Yeah, this one here. So let's go to this link. I'm going to paste this for you guys, just in case anybody here who's tuning in didn't see the last one. Yeah, check the previous one, because if you have questions about some of the things I'm going to do right now, like how did I get the shell, particularly how did I get the shell, getting to actually creating interior and shelling out the inside and getting these Booleans going, and even being able to go in and like create windows. So this is all covered in that last stream. The last stream really went through the lion's share of getting to this point. So I'm going to reiterate on a few of those things just because these tricks and techniques work well to add some extra components, but that's the one you should check out. So moving on, I want to just create a space here in the back where those engine components can live. So what I'm going to do is, this is all Boolean surface plus started with PanelLoops, and then it's been Boolean to some of these areas. Now, I want to go in and just create a little space. I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to do another Boolean technique. So I want to create a little engine piece, or rather a space that is inset or extruded inside that body to add these components so they're not just jammed on top. So using masking, now I talked about this in my previous streams. I don't like the pressure sensitivity with the mask. I want that mask to be nice and sharp. So if I hold Control, I put global settings. So if you hold Control, go to Brush, tablet pressure, you've got global settings. So if you have to hold Control to check the setting for the mask brush. So I bring this over here into my custom UI. So sometimes I'll hold Control and I'll turn that on. So I get global settings, and that just gives me a pure masking brush without any pressure sensitivity fall off. And do Control Alt to click, or Control Alt to sharpen. Chuck, you're saying, thanks for the compliments, man. I appreciate that a lot. You're asking if it's okay to ask an off-topic question, IMM with curve mode. Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually, I'm going to go into IMM with curve mode to do some stuff here. Like, for example, if you take a look at these little groove pieces, doing Booleans to actually get these panel cuts in the body. So trying to get some more techie kind of details. I've also, you feel free to ask your question. The only reason I'm showing this is because going back to my build here, I think I have in this this project, I have some like extras. Let's go take a look. Yeah, so like I did some test examples of doing some pieces like this. And to get these really complicated sort of curved bevels and Boolean shapes to really cut into a surface, this technique I'm going to show today, trying to get more shapes like this. And this, I ended up feeling that this is a little too techy for this design because it's supposed to be a little bit more simplified. So I scrapped it, but I kept it in here. So I want to use it for that, use that technique for this body. But feel free to ask your question, and I will do my best to go through and give you any answers and examples that I can. So let's see here. I don't know if I like this. I'm just kind of sketching this thing out. And to clean up these edges, might hold Control, go to Mask Curve, hold Control and Alt to do a subtract, and remove that little edge. There we go. That looks pretty good. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm just making a mask that I want to do in extractions because I want to do a Boolean to actually cut out the shape. And mainly the reason why I want to do a Boolean, this is something I didn't quite cover in the last stream, which was I've added some extra bevels in here, some trim to the corners. So actually getting a nice bevel to cut through. This same technique I use here is what I use for the top windows. In the last version from the link I sent you from the previous stream, I don't have this bevel. It's just a straight extrusion inwards. And I talked with some friends and they were saying like you should add some bevels around here, and it was a good idea to add these extra bevels that just gives an extra little bit of light that can bounce off of this when I get into like rendering and all that. Look a little bit more technical. Okay, sorry. Ashke, you're saying in the future, can you make male head sculpt live stream? Yeah, actually. So if you want to go back and watch on that topic, if I go to my previous streams, I'm doing 2 streams right now every other week. So this week I'm on full ZBrush, which is the mashup project. Next week I'll be on this one, which is creating a character in ZBrush Core. But the same techniques apply for sculpting. So if you watch this first one I'm actually just sculpting the head. So if you want to go through and take a look, this one you can give that a shot. But yeah, if you want to tune into that stream, you can ask me questions there. That'll be on next Tuesday at 2 o'clock LA time or Pacific Standard Time. Byron, you're asking, what did you do? What did you just do to straighten that edge? Yeah, so you were probably asking about the mask. So what I did was basically I want to clean up a mask edge. So if you hold Control, you get all your masking brushes. So with your masking brushes, the mask curve, what this one does when you hold Control and drag, it draws the curve. And if you haven't used it before, maybe you have. Once you draw the curve out, you can let go of the Control key and you can tap and hold the space bar to pan. And then once you line this thing up, basically if you see the gradient traveling in a direction, it's fading away from that dotted line. So anything on that side of the line is either going to be added or subtracted. So if I just let go, it actually goes through and it's going to add a mask along this path and travel all the way down. But if I hold Control, drag it, let go of Control, and I'm just hitting spacebar and holding it to pan. If I want to subtract that stuff past that line, I hold the Alt key and then let go of my cursor, and that's going to remove that stuff from the mask. And that gives you a nice clean mask adjustment. That's super nice. So one thing I'll say about this, if you hold Control with the curves, this happens with any curve brush. You can always let go of Control. I got my hand off the key. I'm just using my pen. If you double tap Alt, it creates a new curve point, and it creates a sharp point. If you tap Alt once, it creates a curved point, and you can tap Alt again. You can create these sort of like more intricate kind of shapes. It's a nice way to be able to create custom sort of curves and add or subtract from things or use it just to apply. So the curves are really, really powerful. And this thing, yeah, I think I'm going to try to... I'll just keep this as is and see how this looks. So to do the beveling here, the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to go to Subtool. Let's reduce that visible count here. Do Extract, and I'm going to just kick it up at 0.02 and click Accept. So you get this piece. All right, now this piece here, when you get these extractions, you're always going to get, you can crank up when you do an extract, you can crank up the surface smoothness, and it'll make this a lot smoother. You get these wavy lines. But what I want to make sure is I want to keep these edges to be nice and hard. And you see with the extraction, you get rounded out edges. So this technique I was covering in the previous stream, I'm going to go a little bit further with. First and foremost, what I want to do is I've been using this a lot. I love this polish by features when I'm doing extractions where you get a polygroup at the border. And then so you get an edge loop polygroup, and you get one here, and you get one here on the inside. So you get these two. And just FYI, in the tool palette display properties, I put the double side button here in my UI. So when I click double, now what I can do is Control-Shift-Click, and I can see both sides of the surface. So what I like to do is I like to use this polish by features. When you open up this circle and you click and drag it, it's going to polish each of those polygroup borders. So what it does is it smooths out those edges. All right. So you see, as I keep going, it's going to continue to shrink those surfaces and round this out even more, which is something I don't want. So I'm going to undo before I do any polishing. And a little technique that you can do is basically what Polish by Features does is it polishes at each polygroup border. So if you put one here, essentially in, whoops, let's try this again with mask glass. Also here along this polygroup border, if you put a polygroup there, you're going to be able to create sharp edges at these transitions. Now, an easy way to do this with, I like to just do this quick with ZModeler brush. It's kind of become, I've added this into my workflow. Before I've shown previously, you can use things like a selection lasso to isolate this out, go through and just make a isolate selection, press Control W. That's one way to do it. But I've been actually doing something a little different lately, which is, I think, a little bit straightforward and more quicker, or much quicker. So I'm going to grab the ZModeler brush and go to the polygon, hold spacebar, and do polygroup. And I'm just going to put a single polygroup at each one of these corners here. All right, so symmetry's on, so I should get that on those sides. And then I want to do one here at this corner too. So what's going to happen is when this Polish by Features is run, when this border meets this pink one, it's going to create a harsh edge on this side and this side. So let's go and run this. And you'll see now you get this really nice little clean, hard edge. All right, so the benefit is now that we've got this piece in line, we can go to Subtool. I'm continuing to do Boolean subtractions on top of this piece. So I'm going to set this to subtract, and you'll see live Booleans is on. And now I got a little subtractive piece. Sweet. Byron, that was a new tip. I love it. I'm glad to share. Saeed, you were saying, can you teach realistic skin and head poly paint without using texture? Yeah, I will keep that one in mind for later streams. I won't be able to do it this one since I got all this stuff lined up today. But absolutely for future streams, and particularly that ZBrush Core one, I'll be doing texturing on that as well. So going back to like that character, we can talk about that a lot more in that stream. So I'm only a couple streams into that one, so we got a ways to go. So definitely check that out. If you follow that link I sent in the chat, there should be the dates. I'll be on next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Pro 4210, what's up, man? I said it right this time. Take note. Chuck Boss, you were saying, I did an IMM like the default curve tube and made a bunch of variations. Whenever I add a brush to the set of meshes, it doesn't adhere to the draw size. It's much larger. Chuck, so if those meshes are exactly the same size and you've added multiple parts to the IMM brush, if they're not adhering to the draw size, I'm unsure why. It's possible that there's a size difference between them physically in the geometry. Maybe that could cause an issue. I wouldn't really know unless I could actually take a look at it and see the brush that you made. What I really recommend you, if you want to do this, I can probably help you directly and give you more one-on-one time for that. Since myself and other developers at Pixologic do work in advanced support, you can submit a ticket with this and say in the ticket, like, Solomon asked me to submit a ticket, they'll assign it to me. And once I get that, attach the file and I can take a look at it and we can deal with that. I think directly. I think that would be a lot easier, because otherwise I'm not 100% sure why that would be happening in the first place. Yeah, you're welcome, Saeed. So now that we got this little subtraction going in here, what I really want to do is I want this to have a nice bevel. So that bevel there is going to have to come in a different way. So we're not going to be able to assign this bevel here, but I'm going to go grab this bottom polygroup with selection rectangle. Yeah, you're welcome, Chuck, anytime. Support is always a good place to go. We're very active there, and I'll be able to help you out a lot there. So with this polygroup, I'm going to do a little PanelLoops. And if I go, I'm going to turn double side off. I'm going to set loops to 1. I'm going to set my thickness to 0.03. And right now, you'll see at the bottom, we have a little bevel profile, which has a little stair step. So if I just click PanelLoops with this piece isolated, it's going to go in, and it's going to start to try and drop in this bevel. But because I don't have enough loops, so I set loops to 1, it's doing a straight extrusion. So I'm going to go in and give it, say, 4 loops, click PanelLoops. And now you see you get this little bevel profile that comes out. But I don't like how it starts down, goes up. So you see it's following the exact shape we have here. So I'm going to undo. And if we go in here and we plateau this one and then click PanelLoops, you'll see that it's not doing it here, but it's doing it here. So we just need to do the other side. So going here, if we go in, reset this, let's undo, run that PanelLoops, and now you're getting a straight extrusion with a little stair step. So I don't like how this lip goes in and goes out and goes down. So I'm going to undo one more time, and I'm going to set loops to 1, PanelLoops, and you'll see that now what we get is just a little tapered fall off. All right, so you get a tiny bit of tapering that happens there. And it does add this extra little edge loop. All right, so that extra edge loop, what we can do is basically what I want is, and actually this little stair step, you don't even really need this. If you just, let's undo that one more time actually. Let's reset this. You just set this thing to go up like this. Run that panel loop, and now you get a nice steep transition. All right, and then what I want to do is, I'll undo, let's set this thing down to 0. Go in. Oh, almost. Maybe raise that one up. Okay, there we go. So then I want to just get rid of this edge loop. I'm going to brush, ZModeler, delete edge loop, clear that. All right, and then the same thing applies. So I want to be able to do, if I do this polish by features to sharpen this thing up, if I go through and just polish it, what's going to happen is this edge here is going to keep rounding out and smoothing out as I keep polishing. But if I go into with that ZModeler technique, do polygroup, assign one here at each little edge. And then let's go down to the bottom corner. Now if I run this polish, I'm going to get that clean, sharp edge. All right, so then now what I should get is this piece is going to have a lot more bevel going on. So what I'll do is I might want to modify this a little bit. So I'm going to take this piece, clear that, turn on Gizmo. Let's just angle this to come out a little bit more. And now what I'm going to do is just grab this bottom polygroup and just manually adjust. So inverse, bring this down. I'm putting the gizmo at the dead center of that mask, so turning symmetry off and then alt-clicking here. And now I can scale this down. And now I'll get a much nicer little bevel profile there. That looks good. So then clear the mask, and then of course, like if I want to go in and just like make sure that that curvature looks good, if I'm basically just, if I push this thing down further, so if I go, let's go turn on polyframe. So if you take this thing and you just, oh whoops, one thing I need to make sure is I don't have any masking settings on. Let's undo that. Okay, so just using the move brush, right, I can go in and just push that surface down and make sure that these edges look better. And then might do a little polish by features to clean that up. Oh, interesting. What did I do there? I think that's from the first initial. I had something called mask by polygroups turned on, which caused a little bit of an issue. Bro, I was your first support? That's so funny. Well, I'm glad to be. I don't, do you have the same name? in support. I feel like I would have remembered that. All right, and then from this top view, I can kind of start to like readjust that curve. And once that polish is all good, we should be fine. So you're not entirely sure. Oh, you haven't had a lot of need for support. That's awesome. Byron, you say, why'd you go through the whole polygroups process instead of just resizing the bottom? Yeah, so in actuality, I probably should have, but I just wanted to take a moment to show those polygroup settings just in case anybody missed that from the previous stream. That's just being able to do that extrusion helps in some cases with the polish by features and the PanelLoops, but I didn't actually have to do that. So now I'll just like polish this thing out, and then you could always like, yeah, I think that's probably fine. We'll leave it at that. So now we got that nice little subtraction, and then I'm gonna do one more. I just want to have a little sort of body shape here on the side, like a little that sort of exposes some under wires or some areas that aren't, because the tech here is like, the Bladerunner tech is always a little dirty and grungy. It's not all pristine, and so having more wires and more stuff I think would be better. So then going back to this now, this is where I'm going to do that same little setup, so maybe do a little masking. Maybe have this go down. Pre-jog, what's up, man? It is, I don't know, you tell me. This is where I'm at right now. I'm going through this sort of workflow of what I'm trying to get to. I think it's coming along. I'm liking some of these additions. But these shapes here, I'm just trying to go through and work these out maybe in a different way. See, what did I do here? So I kind of went in and just sort of like this little shape cut out there. That one kind of like went up and over. Yeah, and that's just like straight down. I think I want to do it a little bit thinner than I did in the previous version. Let's make sure this thing's going to be straight. So this would be a time for maybe holding control, going to lazy mouse, turning that on. So I have this here in my custom UI. I'm going to hold control, turn that on. The lazy radius is at 30. And I think I like having a little beveled edge there, maybe a little bit better. Okay, sorry, taking me a minute to like figure out the corners. It's pretty messy right now. Okay, what? Turned it off. Oh, you're saying it reminds you of the car from Elysium. Actually, I totally forgot about that. That's, you're right. It kind of is. There's some similarities for sure. That was it was a visually cool movie. I don't know if it was like, it didn't live up to, I think, my expectations. I think I was, after seeing District 9, I remember being so excited for that movie. And then I think I was slightly disappointed. But there was some, I mean, visual effects wise, I'm never disappointed. It was pretty spectacular film for sure. which is always something you can look forward to with Blomkamp. But I don't know. It was the same thing with Chappie. There's always good stuff in his movies. I just feel like District 9 was probably his best film. I was really looking forward to. He was rumored to do Alien. He was going to do an Alien spin-off movie that was like taking place in between, I think, 2 and 3 or something like that. And that never happened. I was really bummed about that. I think that would have been amazing. I don't know. I think that needs some curvature. This could be a pore shape. I'm not sure. I think it might be cooler if it goes back a little bit more. The polish by features and all that stuff's going to clean this up pretty well. Maybe like cut off those corners there. I don't know. This one I think was just a little bit more in line. This one's going a little crazy. Rui, you're asking, do I ever use masking curves for fine sharp masking? Actually, yeah, I was just using it a little bit ago. Usually, if I'm trying to just like figure out a shape like this, the mask pen, of course, is always going to be quicker. But yeah, like to tidy up those edges, definitely the mask curve is huge. I'm probably going to end up using that here in a second. Let's see. That one just worked. I'm going to try and mirror that. So it goes like over here, pretty sharp. Comes up. All right. You know what? Instead of even just doing that, I might just bring over that piece. So we can just take a look at that part. I don't want to waste too much time with this stuff. Oh, no, actually, no, I can't do that because this example is the final Boolean piece. It's not going to work. It's fine. I always try not to show this kind of stuff too much in a demo. I don't know if you guys like, this is just a little boring. It's not the most fun thing to do. Some people like it if you're really looking for that specific visual to kind of really see what happens, but we only have so much time to do these streams too, so I like to get as far as I can. Yeah, so now would be a good time for like mask curve. Now, one thing to note with this is if I hold on, let's just do it right there. So Control with Alt. That does a nice little cleanup. Control with Alt. I can go through and slice that off. Saeed, you're asking, is there a way for me to put my own skin and scar brushes in the ZBrush guide for free? What do you mean the ZBrush guide? Oh yeah, so one thing to note here is I drew this, you see at a 3/4 when I cut here. You always got to consider this is going to be traveling through the mesh. So you see it's removing this part down here. So we got to be really careful about how we view this. So viewing it from the side orthographic view should help clean this up. The ZBrush guide, do you mean within ZBrush itself? Yeah, so here I could tap Alt and give it a little curvature, but that is going to travel through the bottom. Let's just undo that. And then hold Alt to do a subtraction. All right, and then that looks, I think that's okay, but I think I'm going to give it a little bit more space here from the side. I don't want this to be as close as I did in the original to that body, so hold Alt. Let's cut that out. Okay, great. And last but not least, let's just go in here and straighten out that line so it stays nice and parallel with this. I think that'll look a little bit better. Oh, you're talking about Pablo Muniz's site, ZBrushGuides.com. So you're saying you made these brushes and you want to put those there. I guess if I understand that correctly, we wouldn't be, ZBrush Guides is not an official Pixologic site. That is a third-party site by Pablo, and you would have to contact him directly if you wanted to do anything of the sort with him. I know he does work with artists. For example, I shared Vichar Bien's ZBrush Master stream, which that actually has. Oh, I still got my. Let's close that baby. Got some extra stuff open here. This stream, Vichar has worked with him directly to do some pieces using his brushes. So he does work with artists. I think these were using Vichar's clay sculpting brushes, or if not, they're in here somewhere. They're in Vichar's actual ZBC thread. Aaron Dahl, no problem. No, not a problem at all. I just I'm sort of on a series of streams here. This is something that I started a while back called ZBrush Mashups. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing an entire scene, really. I started off with the character. Actually, if you want to take a look, I'll just post this here in the thread. So I've been working on different elements. So I'm working on the vehicle right now. I've done the character. So it's Super Mario World mashed up with Bladerunner. And the plan is to do a whole scene with Luigi as Gaff and Mario as Deckard. That's what I want to do and have like a scene like this in the rain with the car in the background. So I'm building all the elements throughout these streams. And if you want to check those out, I'll paste this here in the chat. I have in this is my ZBrush Central profile. So follow me. It'd be awesome to hear from you, and I'd love to follow everyone back. All the previous streams are here. So doing the character, doing the Bladerunner gun. That was a really fun one, doing some more hard surface modeling with live Booleans to get a really nice high quality weapon that I want to do. Basically, it's like trying to mash up Bladerunner in Super Mario World. I'm kind of taking Luigi because he's Gaff, and Gaff is a Bladerunner that hunts replicants. I kind of thought of the idea of Luigi's mansion. In Luigi's mansion, he has like a backpack that has I don't know if it's a vacuum or a flashlight or both. I think it's a flashlight and a vacuum, but he sucks up the ghosts. So I was thinking if Luigi is Gaff as a replicant, he's gonna have a backpack from Luigi's Mansion with a Bladerunner gun attached to it, and he's basically sucking up replicants. So it's like a hybrid between the two. But really, it's just an excuse to like try and make these things and cross over the worlds. So I'm on the car build here. So I got him done. He's in pose. I'll probably have to repose. I want to do an action scene where they're like firing at each other in the streets or having like a duel. So that's kind of where I'm at. Is I'm basically trying to. I did a little test build earlier today to just kind of figure out what I wanted to build. And I'm trying to get the details all fleshed out for the two cars. So we got the old Blade Runner style car mixed with Mario Kart style Luigi car. That's the two. So yeah. Oh, Rui's is Wario going to be Roy? Dude, that's a great idea. I love this idea. I'm going to take note of that. That's fantastic. I wouldn't be able to. I don't want to be on this particular ZBrush mashup stream forever. I got to get this one done and move on to some other ones. But I'll probably do that in the background for the final scene. I think that would be really cool. Thanks, Arundel. I appreciate it. I'm so glad to hear that you like it. The hard surface streams, yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you're enjoying it, Jiggy, because it is, for me, it's not something that you see as often. Many of us Pixologic developers, myself, Paul Gabry especially, loves to do hard surface. For me, I used to spend more time in organic, honestly. But in the last few years, if you look at my ZBC profile, I've been trying to do more hard surface stuff, because I think it's some of the more untapped educational content out there that people don't necessarily get to see enough of firsthand. So I try to spend as much time as I can. I know Saeed and some others were asking about organic sculpting, which I do in my other stream for ZBrush Core, and I even that one is pretty simple and basic. There's better people to watch for organic stuff. Shane Olsen, for example, does amazing character creature concept stuff. Really, if any of you guys want to check out this stuff, go to let me get back to the presenters. Shane Olsen, Mike Thompson, Michael Pavlovich does a good hybrid of similarly to kind of stuff that I'm showing, a little bit of everything, trying to show a little bit of everything. But Shane Olsen does amazing character, stylized characters. All these guys, I highly recommend all of them. If you go to this page here, you can literally click on each one of these artists. And for example, if you go click on past broadcasts, you can go into all their previous streams. So you can see all the things that they've been sculpting. So if you're into their styles, Shane's been streaming with us for a while, so he's got tons and tons of content. But let's just go take a look at, like Eamon, for example, focused a lot on 3D printing, a lot of his work, but here's doing like tips and tricks for 3D printing, doing a lot of sort of technical work, right? You get all kinds of mixtures of different applications. Mike Thompson is a really fantastic concept sculpt artist that does really awesome work here. So I'd highly recommend watching him. I didn't even see this Rick and Morty piece. That's awesome. I'll paste this in the chat. Yeah, pre-drag hybrid Mike. He is hybrid for sure. I mean, we love Mike Pavlovich because he shows ZBrush off in such a wonderful way, and he uses everything. He really dives into the features. Rui, for Z scripting, if you're trying to get questions with it, Joseph does a lot of plugins for us. I'm fluent in enough of the Z scripting, so support tickets is still the way to go. If you submit a ticket to us in support, I'll paste that link in here before I keep moving on. If you have specific questions, Joseph would be a good one to talk to, since he's spending so much time working on new plugins as of late. So I would recommend him for sure, and I can help you with any basic little things as well. Andrea, so you're saying, how do you do clean negative extrusion of the mask? I use ZModeler brush, but this is a dense mesh. Yeah, so good question. Or Andreas, sorry. The process here is I did the same thing for this piece. So right now we're creating a part, and then we're using live Booleans here to actually do the subtraction. So the mask is just the first step. This is how I did the windows and shelling out the body. So clearing out all this stuff on the interior and actually getting these nice bevels, that was covered in the previous stream. And you'll see that in one of these links I just sent recently. Sorry guys, I'm spamming you guys with links today. Let me go back to, just check out this thread. This thread will have, oh no, actually I can't do that. I need to go to this one here. It is this stream link here, shows all of this stuff. I'll do it again right now though, for this part. So I'm gonna do, I got my mask in there, it's looking good. I'm gonna do Subtool, extract, and I'm just gonna accept it. All right. Now when I go in, the extractions, what they do is if you look at the base car, the base car has all these polygroups. All these polygroups are being transferred over into the extract, which this causes a problem for my workflow, which is the polish by features. So if you go into polish by features, I open up this circle to apply stronger polishing, which will add a little bit of shrinkage. But each of these polygroup borders, when I polish it, is going to start to sharpen. So it's going to sharpen and make these like really hard edges, which I don't necessarily want for this in this process. So I'm going to undo, go back to no actions applied, and I'm going to Control-Shift-Click on these polygroups, reverse, and I'm going to turn double-sided on. And I'm going to basically select all these outer faces, not the edge loop border. So it looks like I got a little extra mask extract from something in there. So reversing this, I should have two panels like this. And I'm going to press Control-W to assign a solid polygroup to both of those. All right, so then this little extra stuff, I'm just going to go Control-Shift-Click on that, do Control-Shift-A, which is visibility, grow all. Then I'm going to reverse the selection, delete hidden. So once you get this, this is where polish by feature starts to work. So the polygroup border, you can go in and just run this thing and it'll start smoothing. But even before I do that, I want to just go in with ZModeler here. And I'm going to do, at each one of these hard transitions where I want to have a hard edge, I'm going to go do polygroup there, do one here. Let's try one here. So this is just the polygon, holding spacebar, choosing polygroup and a single ID, and I'm just clicking to add a polygroup at that corner. So what this is going to do, you'll see here in a second, the bottom, I don't need one. So just at those edges, and let's do one here as well. Just drop one in. So now what you get, and this is with symmetry, if I run this polish by features, it's going to start sharpening at each time. Basically each time this pink group meets that purple group, it's going to see it and it sees it as a sharp edge, so it holds it. And I keep polishing until I start to get a better result. Now this looks like, what's going on with this guy? This doesn't really matter, but let's just do maybe hide some of that, delete hidden, close holes. And then I'm going to reassign that group. Let me turn spotlight off so I can smooth. Okay, there we go. Just making sure the stuff is nice and clean. This, though, that's a problem. So anytime you get some weird little extractions like that, this thing, to make this piece, actually, what I want to do is I'll probably go in and do, actually, no, I don't want to Dynamesh it. I could Dynamesh it, but that's going to create more issues. I think we'll just deal with it. So you got this piece just like sitting there on the outside. And I got my sharp edges here, which is really all I need for the exterior, except, oh, I just noticed I didn't have one here. So let's start polishing, and that should start to sharpen. So the more you sharpen, the closer that thing goes. You'll see sometimes you get a little bit of arcing. And the great thing about this feature is I can literally just move stuff around and like kind of like readjust that curve so it lines up and then polish it, and that will clean it up and get it closer to where it is. So this technique I can use for so many things. If you haven't seen any of my other previous streams, I'll go back to this really quick. Just going into, let me just check out my gallery real fast. I did this Mandalorian helmet, and this is all on my ZBrush Live presentation or past presentations, this is all available. This actually went through all the 3D printing stuff. I hate to span this for any of you regular watchers that have seen this 1,000 times. I'm sorry. But basically making this helmet, I used PanelLoops. I used PanelLoops and using Nanomesh shelling technique to hollow out the insides, the same shelling technique I'm using to hollow out the inside of this car. I went through the whole 3D printing process and set up for keys, slicing it up into parts, and I was able to use this to get a very accurate and clean shape by the end of it. So this technique works for a lot of stuff, and I keep using it just because it works and it gets the job done. And it allows me to not have to deal with building clean topology that takes too long. But this piece here is like, we got the nice edges, and now what I want to do is just add that bevel. So the only way to really add that, if you, going back to somebody asked about earlier, if I want to just go ahead and, like, this gets more complicated now. If I want to just scale in the interface here, I need to have an extrusion. So I'm going to do polygroups, auto group these guys. Oh, are those touching somewhere? There we go. Auto group. Great. And I need to get that bevel in there. So the PanelLoops part, what it does is it looks at the surface normal direction of all these pieces, and it's going to extrude it in for you and do a lot of steps. So it automates a lot of this process. So I click this piece, go to geometry, edge loop. I'm going to turn double side off, set loops to 1. Do my thickness at 0.03-ish. And then I'm going to reset this bevel profile. Let's go up here. Panel loop that. So that gives me at least the bevel in place. All right. So if you want that thing to be bigger, you can increase the bevel, so you can go higher, crank that thing up to 100, and you'll see that that's going to go further out. And then also the thickness plays a part. So we do 0.05. It's going to keep going. Now this is getting a little funky there. We should be able to polish that thing out. But what I'm going to do is reset this curve. Let's go up here and then panel loop that. And let's go in here and just do a little polishing for this. But before I do that, I'm going to go to ZModeler. So the PanelLoops, what it does is it adds one clean edge loop along that surface. So if I go into this edge and delete it, I can clear that thing out. And let's just do a little bit of polish my features here to clean up that edge. There you go. So now you get a nice little bevel on the inside. But I need to go into each one of these corners and then make sure I reassign that little poly group to hold that edge before I do any more polishing and turn this thing into a Boolean. It takes me longer to show through explanation, but once you get the gist of this, I'm able to work very quickly and make a lot of complex shapes very fast, especially with the use of live Booleans. So then polishing these things out, now I should get this, which as I go in and set this to subtract now with live Booleans on, I get this nice little clean bevel sort of cutting into that shape, right? So if I take this thing, I go to Gizmo, let's just try and do, if we scale this thing outwards, you can start to like readjust this part if you want to. And then maybe even just going in, even if you go in with like a big move brush, hold the Alt key. That's going to, so basically what happens when you move with the Alt key is if you hold Alt, it's looking at the surface normals. So when you click on this area, for example, you hold Alt, it's going to, let me just do this on a smaller scale. Alt, click and drag to the right is going to extrude or elevate it straight out from those surface normals. So if you want to do like a piece like this where you want to just readjust and pull this straight out, instead of having to go to the front view, you could go big move brush and just start by pulling it this way, or look at it from this angle, hold Alt and just click and drag to the right, and it's going to pull that thing out just a bit. So I can kind of go in and just readjust this. That little edge there. And then once I get this thing kind of lined up, I might go through and do a little bit more polish by features. Because the polish by features, the benefit to that is it will clean up a lot of these edges and like the waviness of that shape. So you go in here and you can run this thing and it'll start polishing up any of those changes that you made and clean this up quite a bit. Chris, you want to loft between shapes. There's no base lofting features in ZBrush. There's ways to do bridging between objects with ZModeler brush. You could use ZModeler brush to bridge between that kind of stuff, of course. But there's not really any direct, like you can bridge between two objects. Like if you have a cube, make this a polymesh. So we do a duplication. You could do stuff like this where you go, of course, like delete some faces. You could do stuff like this where edge, bridge, edges. You can bridge this way. So here to here, there's edge bridging. There's also, if you go to two open holes, if you go to ZModeler, edge, you could do bridge two holes, and here you get arcing types. So if you click on the first hole, and then click on the second hole, drag to the right adds elevation, dragging up will actually go through an arc and bridge. And these are just basic polygon extruding and ZModeler techniques, but there's no base lofting tools inside of ZBrush in the traditional sense of lofting. Yeah, the curve bridge, you could use the curve, like that's the only real way that we have. You have the, let's go grab the curve bridge will, like if you go in and take this thing, you do frame mesh. So you have two holes. You can frame the holes and then click on those things. And this one's going to go through and connect those with geometry. But a lot of times it may have issues. So in this case, like depending on the angle, if we set this thing up like this, and you do frame mesh, so stroke frame mesh, and click on that curve, you see it starts to do it, but you know, it's not always, it really depends on the geometry, and there's all kinds of stuff. There is the one thing that is basically a lofting tool. I will say I actually have to eat those words. There is a curve brush, the curve tube snap. So what this one does is if you go into like a sphere, this is, you have to draw on a surface, but you can start by drawing one curve and then draw another, and you can basically like bridge between these pieces. So if we go like here to here to here, you can use this one, and then you can edit and adjust these curves. Right? So it is sort of limited to the curve shape, if that makes sense. So if you already have pre-existing surfaces, you're not going to be able to use this really to bridge those in a traditional sense. Byron, a good basic Z modeling tutorial. Actually, just the best, in my opinion, the best way to go is actually our Z Classroom. This is a very specific breakdown. If we go to beginner, or actually no, let's go to courses, digital sculpting and modeling. There should be sections in here for ZModeler poly actions, ZModeler point actions, and edge, as well as curve. But each one of these, if you just look at the polygon actions, there's a video for what each feature does. So this is Joseph Dress going through way back when. This is a video just on what QMesh does, 7 minutes of QMesh. This is 7 minutes of polygon bridging. This is, in my opinion, the most comprehensive and in-depth series of tutorials. It's not showing you how to go through and make something with ZModeler, but it's showing you how those features work and what they're supposed to do. And if you know about polygon modeling, you'll be able to take this stuff and run with it and just explain how these things work. So there's that one. This one are the point actions. And then this one is the edge actions. Saeed, you were asking, is there a way to use Dynamesh when masked some area of the mesh? No. So Dynamesh will only work when there's no mask on the surface. So if you have mask on there, you're going to have to clear the mask to activate the Dynamesh, and there's no way around that. All right, so like this, you know, this piece is almost there, although I don't like how it's like rounding out at the base there. What I'll probably do is I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to keep that shape as is. I think it might actually present a cool little extra bevel in there. The only problem is I don't like how far that face is going through that surface. So I will take this. So that means that this Boolean is just pushing through. It's pushing through the inner shell there. All right. Oh, looks like I only did one side. So let's do, need to do a mirror and weld, which mirror and weld puts the wrong side on. Let's do a mirror and then mirror and weld. All right, and I think I'm going to call it there. I don't want to spend too much time messing around with these extra frame things since we covered that last week. But what I do like here is I can kind of keep messing around with this shape. And if I want to clean this up, let's just polish those features out quite a bit. And I'll leave that as is. So this is not necessarily going to be exposed this way. Like you'll see here, I want to have some extra components that like come out, have extra wires and things kind of going through. I did a much better job. I took my time with that one a little bit and got a clean sort of surface. So then going into this, let's just generate this piece. So I need to do a Boolean here, which means I'm going to turn off all these. Actually, we can see if we set this start group. Actually, these pieces we're going to do the Boolean. I'm just going to turn these guys off. And then set this to subtract. And let's do Boolean, make Boolean mesh. While this is going, I'm going back to Chris's question. You're saying you're trying to loft from a key to an organic part. Yeah, that's your best bet. If you wanted to loft in the traditional sense, you wouldn't be able to. But these guys' suggestions on live Booleans would work, at least bridging it or putting a piece of geometry and dynameshing it across to another piece would be a way to at least weld those surfaces together. Dynamesh or live Booleans would be the most direct way to like weld those surfaces, but you'd have to use other geometry in the process to make that connection. So you'd have to add a third piece in there to bridge it and then weld it all together. The start group feature does, it's essentially doing multiple Booleans. So if you have a lot of subtools in here and you're doing, like say I'm doing, let me see if I can go in here and give you a quick example of that. Okay, yep, it finished. Okay, so start groups are doing essentially, it's setting up a chain of Booleans. So if you have, say at the top, we have the car right now. The car is a start group. And what this means is any Boolean objects sitting below this start group are getting assigned to this piece. And if I set, let's just say I go in and do, let's just put like this piece. We'll put this piece above. So this piece will be sitting above this little part here. And if I turn this thing on right now, it's not colliding with it in any way. But let's just say, for example, I'll just put this here and I'll bring this inwards and I'll pull it forward. So what you should see, actually let's scale it back out. All right, so what's happening with this piece right now is this Boolean piece, because it's sitting below this, is basically subtracting from that part. All right, so if I, for example, you can just reorder these things, of course. So if that was causing an issue with this piece, I could just move it down below. So if I move it below it, turn live Booleans off and back on. But you'll see in this case, it's still, let's live Boolean off, live Boolean on. It's still subtracting. Now, if I go in and I set this as a start group, and let's turn that thing off and on, or rather, let's like leave it up here, and you set this as a start group. Essentially, this is a bad example. I don't have this set up in a way that's actually going to make enough sense, but what would be a good way to do it? Let's go grab like a polymesh sphere. Let's insert a cube here. Okay, we'll say that's going to be subtracting from here. All right, and then let's say we do another one. Let's do insert sphere, and you have like multiple spheres in here, and this one has, I don't know, let's just say we'll give it a star. And we'll set the star to subtract from this sphere, and we'll move this thing, oh, whoops, move the star up. There we go. So you get this thing going, and you have two, basically you have two objects set up in here. So you have a sphere with a subtracted piece to do that cut, but you can't quite see it because this sphere is now set to add, which is now basically this piece is cutting out. So if we turn these things off in order, you'll get this piece is cutting stuff out, going down here. This piece is now adding a sphere back because it's a sphere in the same position. And then you have a star that's doing a subtraction. So that cut is getting lost. But if I set this sphere to a start group and this one to a start group, now what we'll get is basically two Boolean groups in one subtool tree. So this is one Boolean group until it meets another start group, and then this continues on. So when both of these arrows or start groups are on, when I do Boolean, make Boolean mesh, it's going to generate two UMesh pieces. So each start group gets its own part that gets generated. So you see in the new generated piece, we get this part, and then we get this part. So hopefully that explains it a little bit better than the first time. But it essentially it's grouping Booleans inside of the subtool palette. And it's allowing you to protect other parts and then also to create multiple Boolean results in the end. Otherwise, if you don't have those start groups and you have it all set up, it'll just fuse it all into one piece. Master Solomon, please just call me Solomon. Is there a way to use Booleans on a subscription of meshes? What do you mean by a subscription of meshes? Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I'm happy to answer that. Append makes a new subtool. Insert adds geo to the current subtool. Actually, so what Append does is, if you go into like a new piece, make polymesh here. If you do Append, it adds, so let's say we duplicate a couple spheres here. I'll select the one at the top. If I click Append and I add a star, Append is going to add the star at the bottom of the subtool list. So you see it drops it and it puts it at the bottom. If I do insert and say I want to insert this ring, it's going to insert it below the selected one. So you see I have the selected one at the top. If I do insert ring, it puts it below this. So that's the difference between those two. Okay, Brian, I'm glad that that answered the start group stuff. Sorry, it took me a second to come up with a good example for that. But a lot of times what I'll do is, and you'll see that when I go in and let's do delete all. So one thing to note with the folders, for example, you'll see I have this start group going, and I don't even really need to, the start group is not needed for this. So I turned off all the visible subtools, but you see I have the windows in a folder, I have the legs, the front legs in a folder, and I have the wheels in a folder as well. You'll see that these are visible, but they're in folders. So if I turn off all the other subtools that aren't in folders and I just do Boolean, make Boolean mesh, basically what it's doing is it's just going to generate whatever's in each folder as a Boolean piece that gets created. So there should be one piece doing the Boolean for here and 2, 3, 4 parts for this final Boolean results from the setup that I currently have. Weebetching, you're saying how to add another tool to the existing tool in the same layer. So you mean the same subtool itself. So you want to merge another object into the same subtool. If I'm understanding that correctly, instead of doing append or insert in the subtool palette, you could yes, question mark. I know what you're saying. I got you on this. Let's just let this finish. So I could have saved myself. I'm just using this as an example here. But if I would have just turned those off, it would have taken far less time because it just created. If I go to that UMesh generation, so now we get this piece as a Boolean. The windows are now, they're not actually Boolean together, but they were merged together in the process. There's no physical touching of the surfaces, so it didn't do any welding. These are exactly the same. Nothing's going to happen if they aren't touching any surface. So basically just made all these pieces as a merged subtool. So in this case, I'm going to go delete, delete, delete. All right, and then going back to the shell setup here. So to speed that up in the future, I would turn the visibility off for those folders to not generate those things in a new part. And then I'm going to go, so this is where append and insert is important. So I want to insert this piece back into the scene. So we're going to call this UMesh body clean. And then I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to do insert and bring in that new UMesh result. Come on. There we go. We'll call this UMesh body mod 1 or something. And I'm just going to delete these extra Boolean parts because I might save those in the future. Sometimes I'll save those. You'll see I have a folder of like extras and clean parts. If I ever want to go back to those pieces of geometry or just save the project with that version. But now I got this body mod and I don't have to turn live Booleans on anymore. So I've got the actual setup here. Now, going back to Betching's question, if you wanted to insert a piece of geometry, so this, if you refer to this as a layer, this is what we would call a subtool. So the tool actually refers to this thing right here, so we have the tool, and then we have the toolbox. So the tool itself, this is a tool that has, you'll see the number, has 19 subtools. So if you're referring to a layer as a subtool, if I want to insert a piece of geometry to this, the geometry has to exist in the toolbox here, or it has to exist in the 3D meshes menu here. So say you imported a model from another program, it would be here, or if you made it, make sure that it exists here in the toolbox. So let's say if I go to Luigi's character, I want to grab, I don't know, for whatever reason, I want to merge these shoes into this tool on this subtool. That's quite a step, but I need to go to this tool here. I need to actually select it. So you'll see if it's not, say I have the character's head selected here, it's only visible in the tool icon, whichever one is selected from another tool. So if I go select the shoes, let's go back to the car. So I have this car selected. If I go into geometry, go into modify topology, in here, we have the option to do insert mesh. So if you insert a mesh, you'll see it goes into the 3D meshes menu. I can select those shoes, and it's going to grab them. Now, the problem with this is what it does, let's turn on the floor grid here, is it puts those shoes wherever they were in physical 3D space from the other tool. So wherever the object sits, you'll see that it put those here at the bottom. And if you look at the subtool icon, you'll see here right now, if I hover over it, those shoes are sitting on top. Now it's fine to do it that way. In my opinion, what I would do is I would just like append or insert it. Like let's just say I go do insert and I bring those shoes in. It brings those shoes into a separate subtool. But what I could do then is go in, let's see what's going on. Where are they? I think they're just really, really small. And so scale those babies up. Once I got them into place, like I'd move stuff around, right? Let's just say, for example, you want them to be in the same one. Now go to do the merge option. So take the car, go to merge, and you do merge down. And then merge down is going to merge this with this. And now you get them into the same piece. That's what I would do. But you could do the insert mesh and geometry, modify topology perfectly fine. Hopefully that helps. So now I just got to go through and separate this. Let's do a delete hidden. Okay, so moving on. Let's get to the fun stuff. I'm sorry that was, at least I could answer some questions, but in my opinion, that was the more boring part of today. So now I want to start getting some more techie kind of details. And for me, just having some base underlying parts, I'm probably going to do a little kit bashing here, just to speed this up and maybe do a little ZModeler building, because I don't necessarily know what I want to add to this. But a quick little trick that I want to do is I just want to add a base layer of just tech or like frame of the car underneath these surfaces. And I want to just like basically getting to some shapes more kind of like this. So you see I got this nice little like paneled kind of like underlying sort of metallic plate that could serve as a base that could have other stuff on top, and getting into doing something like this as well, just having a nice cool sort of like frame of metal and things sort of like shooting through. So I'm going to add extra stuff on top. I'm getting into doing things like adding like pipes and things going underneath and trying to do this in a quick way. So the idea that I had was to try and mess around with actually using Nanomesh to do this. And Nanomesh is going to require us to draw stuff on top of polygons. So to make this work, what I want to do is I'm going to clone out this tool. So I'm going to clone out, sorry, this subtool. So this car here, with that selected, when I click clone, it creates a new tool with this just as its own primary subtool. All right, so we just have one object in this scene. So basically I'm just breaking it off from the project to do some stuff to it so it doesn't clutter up my subtool tree. And what I'm going to do is build some topology. So I'm going to insert a sphere. Yeah, in Comics Legends, you can also copy and paste the subtool as well. So you can simply do like basic copy, and you got copy and paste here. You can do that. It's also fairly new. It really comes down to how lazy you are. For me, that's one extra click. When I click clone, I just, boom, I get it. One thing I love is you can copy a whole tool and paste a whole tool as well, which is a really nice little trick too. So pressing the X key, I get symmetry on for the sphere. And this is just setting up, inserting a sphere, and we got the car turned on. So with the sphere selected, we're going to topology. I'm going to click edit topo. So now that I have my symmetry on, if you've never done topology with ZBrush, this will be a little basic tutorial. But I'm basically going to go in. So draw mode, if you click, this is going to create polygon points. All right. Actually, hold on. Let's do this. Let's turn off edit topology. I'm going to click the W key to grab the move. And I want this to be here inside of this shape. And let's go do edit topology. Let's see if this works. So click once to add a point, click again. You'll see when you get to the center of the symmetry axis, by default we're in X symmetry, you'll see the cursor turns green. So when you click along the center, it creates a perfectly centered line, and then click to complete those points. Now you always have to be stemming from another point to build from, so you hold control and click to select the point you want to build from, and then it's going to keep building in this direction. And then I can keep going down, meet at the center, go down, and just basically, I want to just create a little topology frame for this. So move, clicking on the move option allows you to move points around. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. It's pretty straightforward. But if you do have questions, let me know. So I want to have this thing frame, just kind of follow that shape. So let's control build out this way. So I might do something like this. So this is just, I'm just creating quads here to kind of frame this piece. And then switching to move to readjust those points and try and make them nice and even. All right. And then once you're done, let's go to adaptive. We're going to set, so real quick, what you get is you get the net of topology here. If you have the default settings, Nanomesh is on at resolution 256 and the density is set to 2. So there's two smoothing algorithms, two remeshing algorithms running. So when I click preview, I'm going to get this really crappy, messy Dynamesh piece. So when you're doing this kind of topology, you want Dynamesh to be off. And density is basically just a subdivision. So this is base level subdivision here. At 2, when I click preview, it's actually going to make it, and it's going to create one subdivision across each one of these polygons in both directions. So at 1, if I just take it down, you see this is what we want, just that base topology. So set your density to 1, Dynamesh is off, preview, and then we're going to go click make adaptive skin. All right, so we'll leave this tool set up over here. The skin, this is where I want to insert or append this back into my tool. So I go back to my tool, and I'm going to go to, I'm going to insert this skin Z-sphere, which is, so what it does when you click make skin, if anybody's not aware, is make adaptive skin makes it into a polymesh skin that we can subdivide and sculpt on. If you don't do that, you can't keep working on this edit stage. You have to make that skin. So what it does is it takes the name of the Z-sphere, the subtool, and it changes the number, and it puts skin underscore before. So it basically just makes it a skin. Now I'm going to rename this and call this like engine nanomesh setup, something like that, something to identify what it is. And now I just want to do a little nanomesh editing for this, just to get a little bit of like extra details or something going on with these shapes. So things that we could do, I might just mess around here. Let's go grab a, I'm going to do a little bit of editing. So I'm going to grab a polymesh star. Going to click W to turn on gizmo, click on the gear, and let's grab a polycube. So I want to do just a simple polycube like this. I'm going to flatten this thing down a little bit. And I'm going to go to ZModeler brush, and I'm probably going to just try and delete this. Edge, delete edge loop. So I get just a little cube. So I want to use this to basically add to all of these polygon shapes and then start playing around with what we can do to it. So I'm going to turn this into an insert. This is a two-step technique. So I want to use Nanomesh for this process. So looking at it from the top view, holding shift, I want to be the perfect top orthographic view. I'm going to click B, and I'm going to click create insert mesh, and I'm going to create a new insert mesh. So now I can click and drag, and I can draw these pieces. Right. So then these parts, what I want to do is I want to turn these into a nanomesh brush, which will draw on each of the polygons. So once it's an insert mesh brush, you click B again, and then click create nanomesh brush. So you can only do that from an insert brush. So going back here, now what you'll see, what it's done is it's turned ZModeler on. When I hover over the polygon, hit spacebar, it's automatically assigned that insert brush to insert nanomesh option. So now when I click and drag on these polygons, if I hold shift, it's going to draw them on top of all of them. So because it's a flat piece of geometry, doesn't have thickness, I'm just drawing on each individual plane. And then now I want to kind of mess around with the settings. So like what I was kind of doing was, if you leave it as proportional, it's going to let you scale the meshes up freely, and they can overlap the boundaries. But if you tell it to fit, then they basically fit the polygon shapes, which is a pretty cool little way to get something to follow the shape of each one of those polygons. And setting the size to 1 is going to put it perfectly at those borders. So I'm probably going to go to like maybe 0.9. Do something like that. Now, something that happens when you first initially drag them, you'll see that we get all these parameters. We can play around with the rotations. I don't want these to have any rotation. So it had like a degree of 3 rotation, which was basically just me going in when I start by clicking and dragging and holding shift. You see it's kind of freely rotating, and you watch that rotation slider on the right side as it moves. So when I hold shift, it still has maybe a little bit of angle. So I'm going to set that rotation to 0, set this to fit, and set this to 0.9. And now you can kind of fill these guys in. All right, so in this stage, like you can take a look, and it's like a way to just, draw shape on there. But what I love about this is I can keep editing this particular shape a little bit further. So for example, if I go in to do, let's just say I want to modify the piece itself that we made. So with Nanomesh, if you go to Edit Mesh and you click Solo, it isolates out this piece of geometry. So let's just say I'm going to do inset. I'm going to do polygon, inset, a single poly. I'm going to choose, instead of region, instead of each poly, let's do region. So we'll do inset here. The cool thing about ZModeler is that scale distance. So if I click and drag, it's scaling it downwards to create a border. If I want the exact same on the other side, if I paint, it's hard to kind of match it and see by just clicking and dragging. I don't know. But if I just click once, it remembers the history and the scale that I applied for that inset, so it's going to be perfectly the same. So I can go and do extrude polygroup all, and I can extrude out these pieces. And actually, I didn't do that correctly. Let's do inset, click and drag once. You can't do any other dragging if you want to reapply. So I just paint those and then click once, and now those should be the same. Yeah, so now you get exactly that same little extrusion. It doesn't really matter for both sides. I'm just kind of showing you a few things along the way. But then once you're done making that edit, if you do edit mesh, it's now applied that to the Nanomesh, and you got those changes. So you can kind of like play around with these settings and see, if it's something you're interested in playing around with, and if it gives you some ideas. But what I want to do is, let's go back, undo that change. I think what I want to do is maybe just play around with, like, you could do some other stuff too, like take these guys, do that inset here, then click, and then we could do QMesh, polygroup all, and we can just punch through and create a hole, and then turn that off, and now you get a little frame here. All right, so this is another way to play around with this stuff. Now, what I'll probably do is, if I want these guys to be exactly the same, or maybe like in terms of the same object, like to shell them together, let's go to Edit Mesh here, and let's try and do, say, Insert, Multiple Edges. Let's click and drag to add a couple. Or let's just do one. So multiple, single, are set specific to one, and I can click and add one edge perfectly at the center. So I just did that here and do that here. So I'm going to just divide this once, then turn edit off. All right, so now if we just take this piece, a few more things I can show you is the Z offset. So the Z is the direction of the object, the Nanomesh object, in relationship to the topology. So how far it's going in or out. Y offset is going in different directions. That's not going to work for us here. X offset, not so good. But I just want to choose how much elevation is happening from this. And the cool thing about this too is if I just switch back to the move brush and I just move, I can actually move this piece of topology with all this stuff attached to it, which is pretty awesome. So if I want these guys to just like kind of bump up on that border, I'm not moving the nanomeshes. These are just instances. So we haven't actually generated them yet. So it's a really nice way to just make some quick edits. And then now, what I did was I added some extra edge loops to the original piece, which means let's just make this part now. So to make this, we need to go down to inventory. You'll see right now, and it's in preview, so I can turn this on or off. Or we can add more nanomeshes. We'll talk about this later, adding multiple nanomeshes to one piece. But if I want to just generate it, I can go to inventory and I can click one to mesh. So what that does is it generates one nanomesh layer to the mesh. And what we get now is we still have that base strip of topology. They're merged together as the same object or the same subtool. So I'm going to Control-Shift-Click on this polygroup to hide the topology piece. And let's do Subtool, Split Hidden. And I'm just going to rename this Topo Nanomesh. Or actually, no, I don't. I want to keep that same name. So you see the name is there. We'll call this Engine Detail 1 because I'm probably going to make a bunch of these. So we'll turn off the visibility for that, turn solo off, and now you get this. So the reason why I added those extra edge loops is it might help me to do some stuff like this. Now I can go to ZModeler and let's do maybe QMesh, a single poly, and I'll alt-click and I can start to maybe bridge these gaps. So the cool thing about QMesh is as long as these guys are traveling the same distance or those surface normals are close together, QMesh will bridge those parts. So keeping these edges as simple as I could makes this part pretty quick. All right. So now you got like an extra little sort of like panel of metal that you could smooth out. Or what I might do is now that they are touching, now we could do something like this. We can go insert single edge and we'll be able to frame this edge loop all the way around all those parts. And then a little trick that you can do if you want to get like edges, all these edges to really smooth out pretty well. If we do polygroups, let's do group by normals, you're going to get a polygroup at each one of these major transitions. And then if we go to geometry, crease, we can crease all of those polygroups. And now when I press the D key to turn dynamic on, it's going to smooth those out really nice and easy. So, oh, what happened there? Looks like there's a little symmetry issue. So I'll do, just quick note, I have a hotkey for this. So if you see me mirror and weld quickly without noticing, I'm just doing Control-Shift-W. That's my hotkey. So it looks like symmetry got broken a little bit, but let's just go in. I'm going to delete this edge loop here along the center of each one of these parts. That does happen at times with the mirror and weld. And then now do it again. All right, so you could do stuff like this. And then what I could do is like, let's just go in here. Rui, that's a zinger for sure. Every time someone learns Nanomesh, Micromesh cries itself at night. It's so true. Micromesh came first, you know, it's like Big Brother. You know, not to say that we don't always love the first ones, but, you know, I'm sure my mom loves my sister just a little bit more. It's just how it goes. Micromesh was the original, and then Nanomesh was like, oh, well, we thought we could do so much more with this Micromesh idea. Why can't we edit these things now and make changes to it? And boom, you get Nanomesh. So it's Micromesh is still near and dear to my heart. Good fond memories. So I'm just painting these faces. Let's do a inset. And then now maybe do like extrude polygroup. Get some cool techie little kind of like base panel, right? So like this is just like an underlying sort of a piece in here that I probably just want to have as like a nice little base. Like I could even go in and just QMesh all these parts together now too. Oh, interesting. That one should be welding. Let's do this. Let's delete all these central edges here. That way, when I go in here and we do... Actually, no, that's not going to work. Just deciding that I don't know if I like this little plus gap in between. So here's where I might remove those creases. Just FYI, my hotkey is for creases. Oh, whoops, I can't. I need to redo those ones. So crease and uncrease, I have Control-Shift-U. So if you click uncrease all, that removes all the creases you assigned. And I need to go through, I'm going to delete this edge loop, delete this one. That way, the bridging, because otherwise when you have those edges, if you're doing bridges, you see you get this extra little space here. And those edge loops were a little premature. So be careful when you're doing edge loops, stuff like that. Like, especially when you're using ZModeler. I find that if you don't, if you get too ahead of yourself and you add a bunch and then you want to make changes to it, then you got to go delete all those things. Or if you're using something like ZModeler to QMesh and bridge across, then it's just extra steps that you spend, you know. Would the fill hole not work for the parts or close holes? Yeah, close holes. So close holes actually needs there to be a hole. So you see like right here, if you just click close holes, so that's modified topology close holes, you click it, nothing will happen. And if you go in here, and it's not, you have to understand with the close holes, if I say I delete this, this, and this, you have a hole. When you do, oh geez, when you do, this is what happens when I use a mouse. When you do close holes, you see this is what it does, and it creates triangles. And for me, that's good in some cases, especially when I'm doing 3D printing stuff, or you want to just have, if you're dealing with Dynamesh, close holes is fine because you can re-Dynamesh it, or if you know, like Booleans and all these other features. But if you're Z-modeling, now you have triangles in there that's going to mess up all kinds of stuff for like inserting edge loops, for example. If I try and insert an edge loop along here, I actually can't even do it. You see it's like shooting in all kinds of crazy directions. So for me, this is where QMesh is just better when it's simpler to just weld those things and keep them quads. And let's bridge these guys here. Oh, and then I missed one here. Boom. All right, cool. I kind of like these extra little holes there on the sides. I think that's kind of cool. Maybe leave that one open too. Okay. Then last but not least, so this is where I would do, so again, group by normals. You'll see you get a unique polygroup at each border. And then you could do geometry, crease polygroups, and then now when I press the D key, it smooths it out and they're perfectly sharp. But a little trick that you can do with, so now we're creasing polygroups and not using actual insert edges. You can set the crease level here. This is telling you when those edges at those crease borders where you get those little dotted lines, when do you want them to start smoothing? So this is correlating to the dynamic smooth level. So if I have smooth set to 3, if I go crease and I set this at 4, or if I leave it at 3, basically you're going to see no change. So dynamic on and off. Smooth level for dynamic is at 3. This is crease level is set to 3. There's no change. So it's after 3. So if I go to dynamic and now I put it at 4, it's going to start smoothing those edges. Right? So you see by moving it to 4, you get a little bit of smoothing. And then as you keep going, it smooths more. So you get a tiny bit of smoothing, but a pretty CG edge there. In my opinion, I don't love the harsh CG edges. I want it to smooth a little bit sooner. So instead, we can go to crease and let's tell it to start smoothing at level 2. So then turning it off and turning it back on, you're going to get a little bit more of a smooth edge. Or in this case, like this is where I kind of like, sometimes the insert edges you get more manual control. A crease is a crease, but you could tell crease to do it at 1, turn it off, turn it back on, and now you get a little bit more smooth edge. So you can play around with those things. And what I'll probably do is combine creases with a combination of inserting manual edges to kind of frame that stuff out. There we go. We got a nice little underbody sort of panel. All right, so this could be, and actually even like down the center, this is where like you could always do stuff like this too. We could go to QMesh. Let's say delete this central edge loop here. And we could QMesh, say like all these polygons here. Or this one. So here's another, one last thing on QMesh. Is actually, I think I'm just going to leave it. I don't love that, like, I don't know if stuff could really sit on top of this. I think I'm getting caught up in the nitty gritty. It's like I wanted to just have some techie kind of extra details. I'm going to put stuff on top. We'll just leave it as is. But you could QMesh and like fill in the gaps if you don't like those gaps or if there's just too much space. Jiggy Watt, you're saying, is there ever a reason to use Extrude over QMesh? That's a good question. I say absolutely. For example, like if you have stuff, let me see if I can get a good example of one that I want to do. Like basically when you don't want stuff to snap together and you want to do an extrude, if things are close enough, QMesh is always going to try to snap if it can. And I don't really have a good example of it here since these guys are all kind of traveling in the same direction. But if you don't want it to snap, Extrude comes into play where you might have two faces that are like sitting close together and you want one to go this way and don't want it to snap here. You can use Extrude instead. So that's really the only difference. It just doesn't have the snapping feature. So I'll probably come into a scenario here in a little bit that will require me to use it. Saeed, you said it's like a Batman car. Thanks. That's a great compliment. Hopefully it's looking okay. I'm not quite sold on all this myself. Like I want to get everything in here. So okay, so that piece is done. Let's just take a break here and let's do, instead of doing more topology in Nanomesh, let's do some kitbashing. So I just wanted to have like a lot of engine components, like things happening over here. And also, yeah, let's go in and do, so we got this piece. I'm going to do, this piece is selected. I'm going to click brush. Let's just go take a look at the IMM model kit. Yeah, Rui mentioned when you don't want stepping. So like with QMesh, one thing I mentioned is like when you extrude, if you pull it out a certain distance and then let go, if you click once again, it repeats the same distance. So that's really powerful. It's a really beneficial thing because that was what I was kind of starting to do here. If I go QMesh, click and drag, you see it has stepping and it goes all the way to the top and it snaps to the same level of that plateau there. So once I've done that one action, instead of having to go click and drag and do all of these, I just click once and it remembers. So now I can go paint multiple faces and just tap, and then paint multiple faces and tap, and it's going to go up and snap perfectly. So QMesh remembers that stepping from the first initial stroke. Don't do that one. And don't do that one. And that's a really, really powerful thing to speed up a lot of just this basic process, right? And with Extrude, you see Extrude doesn't have any stepping settings. So QMesh, you have alignment. So you have 10th step, quarter, third, half, and full. 10th with QMesh, you'll see if I go, let's just do one polygon close up. As I start clicking and dragging, it snaps to the closest polygon, and you'll see it's at a beveled angle. So this is step 1, and you'll see it slightly move. So this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's 10 total steps. If you change it to quarter, you can do it in 1, 2, 3, 4. You get all those steps. Extrude doesn't have any of that. So if you go to polygon extrude, you see you just get these modifiers here. So it's just one full step. And if you click once, Extrude does remember the extrusion distance that you've done manually. So this is one thing it will do. So if you keep dragging out and then let go, and you want to do that same one over here, you can just tap, and it's going to reapply that same extrusion distance. So that's one similarity between Extrude and QMesh. Okay, so back to this. Get this baby smoothed out. And now I want to go in and just do just a little. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I don't want to make everything. The IMM model kit's got some pretty cool little parts in here that we could use. A lot of times I'd like to start with these because they're clean, low topology. We can edit this stuff later. So let's go grab, I just want to get like a little engine component. How about this one? I think I like this one. So you could, of course, go in here and we could just go start clicking and dragging. So one thing to note when you do insert meshes, do not, it's really bad to, or it's gonna, you're just gonna have bad performance when you have dynamic on. So you see if dynamic is on and I'm trying to drag, you can see how long it takes me. It's very choppy. It's not intended to have dynamic on when using insert brushes. So turn that off. We can start by just clicking and dragging this. Turn on gizmo. And here's where I might just go in, Control-Shift-Click to grab these polygroups. Let's do Subtool, split hidden. So now we get these parts. So now I might just do a little masking. So I think for this, like I want to have like 4 of these guys. So a little trick is if you hold Control and drag, it's going to do a duplication in the same subtool. So you see they're still, these are combined essentially. So you're just kind of duplicating. It's a duplicate special technique. And then now you get this nice little component. And I might take this and make this just a little bit skinnier. Yariv sent me an email. Okay, man, I will check that as soon as I get done with this stream. Thanks, dude. I hope you're doing well. And Moshe put his images on ZBC. Sweet. All right, I can't wait to check that out. Saeed, like when we use Extrude with Shift, is there a way to create semicircle or soft edges? Yeah, so you want to do that. You're basically referring to a bevel, I believe. So if you want to do like you have like the smoothing technique, it's going to round out and smooth out that geometry. But if you go to the edge with ZModeler brush. So make sure you grab ZModeler, go to the edge Oops. And hover over, hit spacebar. We could do a bevel. And you can do different types of bevels. So we could do 2 rows, 4 rows, sharp edge, or soft edge. So say we do soft, and if you go click and drag downwards, it's going to do a little bevel edge, and it's going to go through and add basically softness. So you can choose, like with sharpness, you have an option. With this, if we do this, just clicking and dragging, you're going to get a more rounded out edge. Now, something I also like to do here, here's the little technique, is let's say we just do a sharp edge with a single row. So you get one step of a bevel here, right? So when you smooth that out, that's of course going to help round out that edge. But let's say you want it to have a lot of curvature happening at that surface. What really helps for this one is if you go to just doing a single step, if you go to the edge, go to insert multiple edges, and we'll do interactive resolution with interactive elevation right here. So what this means is when I click and drag to the right, it's going to, or up and down, it's going to add more edge loops. And when I drag to the right or left, I can actually go in and I can round out that shape. All right, so the benefit to that is you'll see we just did one of those things. So, and if you just click the D key, now you're going to smooth it out and you'll get a nice like rounded out piece there. Is that, yeah, you're very welcome. I think that covered it. So here's, and I'll just say really quick, here's what's really cool about this. So I set that setting. So now when I just click once, it's going to reapply it, and boom, I get the same one. So with that stored to the insert multiple edges, if I go back to the edge bevel, this stored the previous one. So if I just go click on the remaining edges, I can reapply that exact same bevel at the exact same distance. And now once I go through, I'll just reapply these bevels really fast. All right, that's done. I just did all those guys. Now I can go back to the insert multiple edge, and it remembers those settings. So I just click once, and I can reapply that same insert edge loop resolution with the same elevation. So knowing that ZModeler stores these history actions for repeated steps like this makes this reapplication process so much easier. And then I can go through. I think I got them all. Now press the D key, and now I get a nice, clean, sort of like rounded out shape. It just holds that shape a lot better. All right, so tips and tricks, guys. Tips and tricks. Okay, I'm glad that that's useful. And I'm just going to do, see, this is where I might modify these. So I'm going to do single edges, go frame these guys a little bit better. This stuff I know, like you could use creases for this, of course. Creases would be fine. I just know that I'm going to want these to be nice and crisp for sure. So I'm not going to mess around. I'm just going to go straight to edge loops. Play no games. Marco, I'm so sorry. You had a question. You were saying you're Italian, and I could just, if I can describe it slowly. You were asking, is it possible to move or rotate or scale by writing precise values, so as to say move the others with the same numerical value? In this case, the only way to type in a value is when you're dealing with the world space axis. So let me undo that. Let's just take a look at something like this. So say we go, like, say you want to do these objects here, and you want to rotate them, I don't know, like 25 degrees. If you hold the shift key, this locks to every 5 degrees. Okay, so you can rotate to, say, I don't know, say we'll go to 25. You rotate that to 25. If you go to, say, the chair here, you frame this out, you can hold the shift key, and you can see that number and go to 25 as well. There's no way to type in that value for the gizmo. So the only way to really do this, I'll undo this part, is if you go to, say we go to the floor grid here, let's just grab a star, and I'll put another object in here. Let's do insert a cylinder. Oh, joy. Well, don't insert cylinders, people. Yeah, Rui is pointing out deformations. That's what I was going to show. Let me get this recovery file back. It's, oh, come on. Jazz hands. Yeah, this is the part where I just do a song and dance while we wait. Yuriv, you're saying those slick chamfers on those edges. Yeah, actually, I called you out earlier. I was showing that at the beginning of the stream, and that was a good tip on your part. I appreciate that. Yeah, the scene is too heavy. I do have, just for presentation's sake, I have a lot of tools here. So I have the car that we're working on. I have the final car. I have the character that has all the subtools. I have the wheels and the weapons. All this stuff is here in this one project. So it's probably a pretty big file. The question is, do I want to force quit? Let's just give it a click. Come on. Rui, your pro tip, you're saying setting subdivision levels to their lowest on all subtools makes the scene lighter. It will definitely make the scene load quicker, that's for sure. It'll make the scene tumble faster, absolutely. And in addition to Rui's tip, having dynamic mode on for a lot of your subtools will, over time, if you have more than, say, 10 subtools that have dynamic on, you're asking ZBrush to preview models, depending on the smooth subdivision slider modifier, to preview subdivisions that it doesn't have. It's actually easier to have the object with subdivisions to tumble than it is to have it with dynamic on if you have a lot of them on. So you may experience lags in rotations and just navigation, essentially. Oh, come on. This wasn't taking this long before. It's okay. If I have to go back to a different file, I will. And recovered, no. Okay, I don't want the tool. I'm gonna load my project. This is why it's always good to be prepared. I'll just delete some of the extra stuff from the first build. Yes, Marco, I'm glad. I think hopefully that helps your issue, at least showing the gizmo. Let me show you the deformation just to elaborate on this topic a little bit further. Because the deformation is going to offer you the ability to type in a value. So let's try this one more time. Let's go insert or bring in a cube, and let's do a ring. So we'll have 3 different objects. All right, so one thing to note in the cube, let's just take this, turn on the floor grid here. I'm going to put that off in space, and let's do, all right, we'll leave the ring center. We'll leave the cube as an example. So you have the object right now sitting at the world center. So in the deformations tab, you do have rotate, for example. So say we start with the star and you want to rotate it in X. Say we want to rotate it like 45 degrees. So we'll type 45, and that does that rotation. We can go to the ring, and we can type 45 here and click enter. So you click just above the little orange slider is going to isolate the value, so you can type in the value, apply the rotation. Now, if we do the same thing for the cube, let's go in here and do a 45 and click enter. You'll see what it's doing is like a clock. The world center is the center pivot. So the pivot for the deformations are actually looking at the world center. So as I rotate with this object off the world center axis, it's rotating around that space. So you won't be able to assign that value to all those objects unless they're sitting at the world center. So what you could do is if you undo, say you've moved it off in space, if you turn on gizmo, alt click to put it at the center, or you could just, alt click to put it at the center and then click the home icon to send it to the world center. You can send it back, apply rotation, and then move it to wherever you need it to. That would be the easiest way to go. In my opinion though, if you are looking to, it depends on how many subtools you have. The gizmo does offer, if you hold shift, you can lock it to every degree. So you could use that degree, and it doesn't take too long to say do 20, go click 1, do 20, and reapply with stuff sitting in the space that it was in. You can also go to the Z plugin and you can open up the mist utilities, and you can change your rotation snap angle. So you can set this to say 20, and we'll set the snap angle. And then we'll go here, and now we can hold shift, or as you see right now, it's actually set to 1. Let's go back here. You can essentially use this slider to change that angle in which you're rotating this thing. So right now it's at 1. So holding shift, I'm going every 1 degree, which is up to you if you want to change those things. But hopefully that helps to elaborate on that a little bit more using the deformation. And yeah. Your thoughts on Anycubic Photon S3D printer? That one I haven't used myself, but I have heard good things. I wish I had more to say on it, but without any personal experience, I wouldn't want to say too much. I have heard good things, though, from friends that have used it. Yeah, okay, so Marco, you're excited about Snap Angle. I love it. Yeah, so check that out. That's, again, Z Plugin, Misc Utilities, Snap Angle. All right, so sorry, guys. I'm going to go back to, I have to go back to this build here. And I'm just going to go in and delete some of these extra components. Delete. I really liked that first piece. Oh, no, I don't want to do that. I really like the build from the last part that I just lost. It's too bad. I do have the recovered tool, though, actually. Let me just go back to this really quick. I want to load this project. If I would have left, if I was just being very impatient, if you leave ZBrush going and let it do its saving, it's almost always going to give you a recovered project. If in some cases you may get a recovered tool, I can double click this, and it only got the duplicate one that I was working on to do the insert of the cube. So if you just leave that stuff, try not to force quit those things because you want that recovered project. Like in my case, I don't want to lose that stuff. And I do have, just to take note, like I do have a pretty dense project. So I got a lot of stuff in here. And probably just getting too big. Probably just a little too much to handle in that moment. So then this stuff I want to get rid of. Why is that all merged together? Sorry guys, just 1 second. Blind Fox, I did do the Nike shoe tutorial. That was one of my streams. Why is it Mario muscular? I did do that in one of my live streams. I'm so glad you loved that. I need to do more of those. That was one, I teach product design using ZBrush to do things like shoes and soft goods and wearables, but I wanted to share that information, and I use a lot of the same stuff I use here, using PanelLoops. If anybody's interested in that, I'll grab that really quick. You can actually go to, just grab my ZBrush Live page. That was back, I don't know which, back here, maybe page 2. Yeah, this one. The Nike Air Mag build. I'll paste that in there, page 2, if you guys want to check it out. Some really cool techniques in there, just getting some really creative and abstract, like heel shapes and things like that, using a lot of the same stuff I use here. Let's see, this is why I want to get rid of that. We got those in there. Just delete that. Delete that. I'm going to dump those lights. This piece, I don't really love it. Let's get rid of this guy. Delete that. All right, so this is about where I left off. Oh, and this little side panel. Let's do that one again. All right, I'm terribly sorry for the delay. So then now that we've got this stuff lined up in here, what I really want to do is start kitbashing this engine a little bit more. So again, making sure dynamic is off. I'm going to go to brush, insert. I'm going to just grab a couple of components to get me jump started. So this is Joseph Dress brush. He really, really went for it with this one. There's so many amazing pieces in here. And a lot of these can be repurposed. I like to repurpose these in a pinch when you just need to get some quick shapes. Now, you may notice if you use insert brushes, something that I don't like, I don't like losing any screen space. So the IMM viewer at the top, normally by default, you would see it as this. So the placement should be at 1 and auto show. So when you click an insert brush, you get your parts and you go through your menu. So for me, I just like to keep my visibility of the viewer. I don't like this to be visible while I'm working. So you can turn, in preferences, you can turn auto show and hide off. Now when you have an insert brush selected, if you press the M key, as in mic, you get the secondary viewer. So this is going to show you all those parts. And I think I just want to grab maybe just one of these. Grab these vents. Click and drag these. All right, that looks pretty good. And I'll do, so one thing to do when you do insert brushes, as soon as you, I'm going to split this off, I'm going to do split unmasked points. So now we get those engine details. Now, one thing that I'm going to do auto groups. So I have a hotkey for this. So it's auto groups button here. Yeah, pre-drag, in trust we trust, absolutely. Byron, you're saying it's not in recents in Lightbox. I assume that you're talking about the Lost Project, which in this case for me, because I try to avoid any pauses and stops when I have some of these bigger projects. So I turn my quick save. By default, your quick save is going to save every 20 minutes. I turn this off and I manually save. Let's just go ahead and just leave this at 20. Set the restoration. So that way, just in case I run into any problems, quick save is always there for that. But then what I want to do here is I want to auto group, and I want those fans to actually be up a little bit higher. So a little trick is, like, if I want to Control-Shift-Click on those pieces, you'll see usually ZBrush always needs a vertex point to select the polygroup. So you Control-Shift-Click on the vert, that selects the polygroup. Trying to grab these guys, you'll see that when I Control-Shift-Click, it's going to grab the green stuff because there's no vertex points for these little panels. All right, so a little trick that you can do, we can grab the outer, we can reverse, of course, and then we can go and isolate this. But a little trick that I like to do sometimes is just using the slice curve. If you actually go across here and draw a slice curve through, this actually draws an edge loop, and it adds vertex points along that edge loop. So now if we go, let's just do that. Slice curve doesn't work symmetrically, so I got to do it on the positive side. And then we'll mirror and weld that. And now I can actually go through and I can Control-Shift-Click on these parts. So I want to pull those upwards. So what you can do is you can mask this off, isolate it, inverse. I can use Gizmo, so I want to be able to pull this straight up. And using Gizmo, if I just Alt-click on these faces, I can grab the surface normal direction of these top faces here, and then I can just pull this thing up and just kind of make those fans sit a little bit higher. And then now another little trick that I want to do is I want to grab this piece that I'm working with, one of these fans, but I don't want the fan blades, and I want it to be perfectly centered along the axis. So I want it to sit along this central path. So going in without symmetry, I can click and drag, and I can start to try to align this, but I know that it's not going to be perfect. So my whole project here is actually sitting in the dead center, so I can always make use of my mirror and weld, and I've got it where X symmetry is working. So anything I do on the left side, I can mirror and weld over to the right. Now I want to make this perfectly center, and sometimes I like to just grab one of these IMM parts and actually make it a subtool. So once you've selected it, if you go to Geometry, open up Modify Topology, you can actually click Mesh from Brush. So you can break out that piece from that one we have selected and make it its own subtool. So before I do it though, it replaces the currently selected subtool mesh. So if I insert, I always just insert a poly star, you'll see that'll be selected. Man, it's like I'm plagued with this image. Every time I try and save this project without this grid, it keeps coming back. Let's do a quick save here. Steve Z, I love your Steve Z. Live easy. I love your name. That's amazing. If you wanted to, could you design every single part of the car and assemble it? Yeah, absolutely. You really could. If Like if you wanted to say build like a 3D printed kit, you could absolutely, but depending on the scale, yeah, I mean, sure, you could always like just slice these things off and just make the pieces and glue stuff together. Absolutely. If you like, if you have questions about that in particular, this is something I covered in my Mandalorian stream. This one here, I'll paste this again in the chat for you. Maybe you just joined in and didn't see it. So this basically has like a full breakdown of the build for the Mandalorian helmet, but then in the end, I went through and I wanted to print this out on a MakerBot Replicator 2, which is about this big of a print bed. It's 11 inches by 6 by 8, something like that. And the scale, I want to wear it. So for me to wear this helmet, I had to break this up to I think it was around 10 parts to be able to print each one. And I went through the process of making keys, giving it a place to reassemble and reattach and glue it back together. Unfortunately, during the lockdown came into play when I was just starting to print these things, so I've lost access to the printer at our offices, but I'll come back to this eventually. But this stream talks about all of it, making each part, how to make it up, how to set up keys, and then setting it up to basically allow yourself to reassemble. So I'll put that here in the chat. And I hope that gives you some idea. So in this, just FYI, in here you'll see these links. These are links to each part of the stream. So the last video, I believe, this one here is, oh, actually no, the last video is down here, somewhere at the bottom. The part 4 should be available. And you can always send me a message on ZBC, shoot me a follow on my page. You'll be able to, we can connect there if you ever have like direct questions. Anybody who's watching, I've been spending a lot more time on my ZBC account with my gallery, so I'd love to follow you guys back and we can chat directly and share stuff, and it's a great way to communicate. So, but yeah, on that topic, yeah, that'd be awesome. I don't know if I'm going to do this project here. I'm trying to just do a final image in a scene. I need to get that part done first. So for now, I can kitbash to my heart's content and go crazy and make whatever I want. But this piece here, so I guess on that topic, like the way you make stuff, if you're going to 3D print it and reassemble it, is more important than it is if you're just making an image. So like talk to great concept artists like Justin Goby Fields or other people that essentially just, they can use ZBrush whatever way they want. Doesn't matter about topology, doesn't matter about surfaces. It just matters about what the final image looks like. And if you can get there quickly, you know, that's really what matters the most when you're just doing images. What 3D printer you used? The 3D printer I used was a Replicator 2, and it was PLA plastic. So I was doing a test build. In the video, you'll see, you know what, guys, let's talk about it. Let me go back here. I'll play this little video clip at the end talking about essentially just doing, you won't have audio, but figuring out scale. So matching it to a 3D scan of myself, knowing that I'm going to print on the Replicator 2, that was going to be a test print. I figured I might get to actually doing maybe a different printer towards the end, but using like a caliper tool, you'll see here we got some of the parts. So they're broken up into little slices here. So let me see if I can, unfortunately I just don't have them with me to show you, but there's like the front plate, which is PLA, just a gray shade PLA on that Replicator 2 that we still have. MakerBot sent that to us forever ago, and we still have that printer at the office running really well. So I was using that as a test. It's cheap. PLA is very affordable, and it's fast, and it's light. So there was a lot of benefits to, I think, using that material, at least for the prototype. A 3D scan. So what I did was I used an iPhone. So you can just, if you go to the App Store on the iPhone and look up 3D scanner. I think the first one I used, it's a free one. You just go through and capture it just using Photogrammetry to create a 3D mesh and bring that into the project. So that's actually covered in the stream if you want to check that out. So like on my page, this one right here, this last video, actually no, it was this one. I'll send you guys a link directly to that video if you want to check it out. Rui, you're calling me out, man. This is there is maybe a pattern here. The word replicant is coming around a lot. Okay, so anyways, I got to get back to this. I'm on the mesh from brush. So I want to grab this vent piece. So I select, or I bring in insert a polymesh star, go to geometry, modify topo, and I'm going to click mesh from brush, and it's going to replace this piece with that one. So now I have this in my tool that I can now rotate. It's at the world center. And let's go. I'm actually going to go back here to Z plugin. I'm going to set that snap angle to 5. There we go. I like that 5. And now I'm going to just bring this. So I want to make like a little engine kind of chassis or something, just like a base. And I want to get rid of these fans for this part. So let's do auto group. I'm going to isolate this out. And so I'm going to just, this is where I start to speed things up. Like when I press the 2 key, if you go to my ZBC thread that I've been sending to you guys a million times today, I have my custom UI, which I press the 2 key, and I have modify topo essentials, which is delete hidden, close holes, that kind of stuff. So I don't have to keep going back and forth to the trace. I just prefer to do that for speed. And then I'm going to go into ZModeler here. Let's clear out some of these edges, and then I'll make it easy to do QMesh and close this thing off. Now I get a nice little piece. And then maybe we could like stretch this thing out, angle this thing down. All right, then let's just add some more parts here. So let's go do now that I have a new piece in view, I'm going to grab that insert brush. Let's just add like a little bolt head. I like this panel. So this I could hold shift to keep it locked and maybe do a little rotation. Steve Z, yeah, you're very welcome, man. I hope you get some good stuff out of that. That was a fun project. I really, really love that project. I can't wait for this lockdown to be over so I can go back and print this stuff out. So I have split hidden in this menu as well. And then I might do auto groups. Sometimes when I want to move stuff around, I could just do move with polygroups. So if you group by normals on an object like this, so you do polygroups, group by normals, you get those polygroups. And a lot of times you could hold Gizmo. With Gizmo, you can control click to mask polygroups and move stuff around. Or another fun way to do it is with ZModeler. You could use move with those polygroups. You use polygroup all as your ID, and then you can go in and just start scaling the stuff down. The slicer, so I was using Simplify 3D actually to generate those parts. Simplify 3D is become my my new love. And I've tried other things like Cura and of course like MakerBot's desktop software. Their stuff is a little bit more obsolete these days, but the Simplify 3D was a purchase that it was well worth it. Got to thank Paul Gabry for the recommendation on that. He was screaming it at me forever, and then I finally gave it a shot, and the first time using it, I was like, this is well worth it. Kylie, you're saying there are fans in most 3D printers, so it depends on the model, and they can be loud. Oh, you guys are just chatting about just ventilation and all that stuff. Yeah. Yep, that is very true. Okay, so here I'm going to go into Brush, IMM. I want to create some little tubes. So like some little engine tubes. Here's just a little quick technique that I like to do. So with symmetry on this piece, I'm going to go click and drag. And then we can turn symmetry on. Now, when you move these guys, I'm going to just push those into that surface. And, whoa, that doesn't look good at all. Let's move that up. So I'm just dragging and dropping these little caps here. And this part, so I want these guys to basically just, I want a little space for tubes to kind of wrap around. The way I like to do tubes is I'm a huge proponent of deformers. So what I'm going to do here is go insert let's grab a polymesh star. I'm going to frame this thing up. Press gizmo. I'm going to go grab the polycylinder. So replace that. Let's scale this baby up. Actually, not the polycylinder. I want the cylinder 3D. So I need these triangulated corners. And I'm going to turn this on and let's do a lot of edges. All right, so you'll see why here in a second. So let's move this up and over here, and I'll actually do a duplication of this. So I'll keep this, we'll call this tube 0. Keep that one edit mode. This will be tube 1. And I'll scale and put this thing into position. So I'm going to do it on the proper side. So I'm always making sure I'm keeping tabs on where my symmetry side is, so I can do mirror and welds. Okay, so we'll put this thing into place. Now, if I go in with Gizmo, once this thing's in place, if I go click customize, we can do the bend curve. So the bend curve gives you the frame. If you haven't used it before, you have cone controllers. So this little red cone, this is choosing which axis you want these curve points to go. So this is going along the x-axis. I want it to go along the z-axis. So changing this to y, this goes vertically, and now I can deform this thing vertically. But if I go one more, it goes to the z-axis. Now we get these points going along the z-axis. Now the furthest orange cone outer from this point here, so this is our centralized cone controllers. And then clicking and dragging this outwards is going to add more points. So adding, let's say we'll add 5 points. Now I can go in and I can start to do stuff like this. Now there's a reason why I added so many edge loops along that surface. If I undo this, let's say we go to Gizmo here, we can tell it to delete. And then actually let's undo back to before. We should be able to undo back to before we had the cylinder 3D cone controllers. Because this is attached to the gizmo, the cylinder 3D will allow me to go through and change how much resolution I have on the cylinder before I go. So say I don't have that many edge loops. If I go here and I say maybe have 4 or 5, now let's go apply bend curve. And as I start to pull this thing out in these long steps, the problem that you run into here is the bend curve deformer is using vertex points that are essentially relying on edge loops. So more edge loops gives us more verts, gives us better deformations. Without those vertex points, we're not going to be able to get a clean result here. So this is why I'm going through at the beginning with this, and I'm just adding a bunch of edge loops so I get a nice clean tube. Those are going to be stretched out along the curve once we go through and apply. So going to bend curve, now I'm going to go in. The great thing about this is while the bend curve is in edit mode, you can press the W key to turn on move, and we can always reposition this and press W again to go back to this view. So you can use the gizmo and use the deformers while working in these modes. So you're just toggling back and forth between draw and move essentially. And then this little blue one, if I click and drag this one, it does a smooth transition between all points. So I can start by, let's just get this thing into place. And then let's kind of go in here and move this around. So I've only added 5 points. Another great thing about this deformer is if I click and drag, I can continue to add more points later down the road. So I always recommend start small. You get the big movements done, and then you can add more points to do sort of fidelity between these points. So the more resolution you have, the more edge loops you have for this piece of geometry, the better it's going to deform, and the more it's going to keep these shapes as well. So being able to keep those shapes is going to be really crucial to make sure this thing doesn't get destroyed when I smooth this thing out too much. Another great thing about these deformers as well is you can go into the points themselves. So if you click on the point, you have 3 cone controllers. So we've got the twist, which will actually twist each individual point. We've got the scale, which is going to scale up that section. So if I click on this point, I can go do a little inflate. So kind of going back to, I was playing around with this a lot with the previous piece. Let's go grab the my thread here really quick. Like I was trying to figure out how to do this is supposed to represent Luigi's basically sucking up ghosts. So when the ghosts go through the tube, they're inflated. This is using the just doing a little Z modeling to create a tube that has some techie details, and then doing inflations at these parts to get this to sort of look like stuff is kind of moving through the tube. So a really fun way to kind of play around with this thing, but it's really, really powerful to just get these more complex shapes, and you can work on it separately. I prefer to do this most of the time over doing insert curves in this case, because I'm not drawing it on top of a surface. I'm working in free space. So that's why I prefer to use it in this case. So then once you're done, I can go in and we can like maybe just give it a little bit of like some nice little cool bend angles, so it's not too, just kind of give it some more shape. And then let's click accept. So you have to accept these. Now the piece I made was a little too thick in this case. I could have scaled down the cylinder, but what I could always do, deformation comes in handy for this stuff. We could do inflate at like a -5 maybe, and then type enter. Maybe do like a -3. And then now you'll get this nice little piece. And we could always use the move brush to like tidy this thing up. And so you got a nice little tube there. Now I'm going to mirror and weld this over. So now I got that piece in place. And then I'm going to take these caps. I want to keep all these things. I'm going to do key shot renders. So I want to keep geometry separated as much as I can. So that way I can do separate materials. I can do smoothing at different levels, things like that, as well as going into stuff like this now. And let's just do like, say, go into this piece. Let's do a bevel. Actually, because this cap is a little, because of this geometry, I wonder if I'm going to be able to get a bevel. Let's try. Yeah, that's triangulated. It's not quite going to work. So instead of doing it that way, let's go do, we could grab this polygroup. Let's do inset polygroup all region. See if we can, nope, it's not going to work either. Oh, I'm just noticing that QMesh might have given me some duplicate faces. Let's go do delete. These faces didn't quite get removed. So let's try bridging these back together. Okay. And I just want to do a tiny little bit of bevel. Is it possible with this geometry? Let's see. Nope, the inset is going to round that piece out a lot. Let's try and just move this polygroup up. Insert a single edge. I might have to do too much modifying to make that work. That's fine. I'll just leave it as is. And then let's just insert an edge loop here and here. So you get that nice clean piece. All right, moving on. Blind Fox, sorry guys, I've been ignoring the chat here for a second. I went on a little rampage there. You guys are talking about printers. Blind Fox, you're saying, thanks for sharing this technique. Sweet. I assume you're talking about the bend curve deformer, which, if that's the case, yeah, you're so welcome. It's one of my favorite things to show. Saeed, very nice and professional. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Byron, you're saying, finally a technique you already know. Dude, that's great. Well, that's I guess that's a good thing, right? You're getting some good tips, and but it is nice to know that like you do know some things already. I would hate to also be like, oh, everything's new. It's great when everything's new, but also if you've been using ZBrush for quite a while. ZBrush is pretty dense with this kind of stuff, so a lot of the stuff gets missed. Paul, Joseph, myself, we try to show as much techniques as possible. If you guys are looking for people to like really make artwork, of course, we are all artists, especially Joseph Druss being our sort of lead artist at Pixologic and having worked in industries beforehand. But we are also, promoting ZBrush itself. So there's definitely people out there that are streaming for us that are doing much better artwork than I could ever do. But I like to share the technical stuff most because I think that's what you guys come for. So then I kind of like, let's see, this piece doesn't look like it's perfectly mirrored. Yeah, I'm going to mirror and weld that one. Nice, that looks good. All right, and I'll probably keep messing around. I'm going to keep kitbashing and just adding more stuff, but I want to get to some more detailing here. Let's take a look at the time. It's 1:30. I'm getting so close to the end. So for these little side components, just one more thing. Like I want to do maybe some of these pipes and things. So let's delete those guys. We'll start over with this. So in order for me to make this work, I'm going to do something really quick again with the Nanomesh. I'm going to clone this piece. Let's go insert Z-sphere. All that really matters is that this thing is sitting within the object. Let's go topology, edit topo. Make sure, press the X key, symmetry is on. Let's go back to draw mode. So I'm going to do one more quick build here. This is going to serve as two things. So it's going to give me topology to build maybe for this additional sort of wing that I want to have that maybe like contracts and comes off of this thing. I'm kind of thinking it'd be cool to have like some mechanical kind of arms that like open up this little section, and then also just having some underbody sort of panels and details happening. This topology will help me to like just play around with the same kind of nanomesh techniques that I was doing for that back panel, but maybe do a few different things. So this is going to go up. All right, and then for this one, I might actually just do a try. For modeling's sake, tries are great. I used to get hung up on having triangles or not having triangles too often, trying not to do that, but you really need them sometimes if you're just building specific shapes. And in this case, because we're just modeling, I don't care too much. Mark, you're looking for the custom UI. Yeah, absolutely, man. I actually, Brian B&K has been checking out the stream, and I posted it in this thread at the bottom. So let me just make sure. I'm going to test this download link really quick. Let's download. Okay, that's working. So here, I'm going to paste this at the bottom of this thread. Go down there. You'll see this download link here. This is just a Dropbox link. I gave you just quick instructions. It looks like you know what you're doing. I also just listed the hotkeys. So like the ones that I use a lot are I try and limit the amount of hotkeys, of course, because there's already so many. We've got mirror and weld, uncrease all, crease all. The ones I use a ton is auto groups and group by normals. So Control-Shift-P, Control-Shift-9, those are listed. And then of course I like to do Control right arrow to open and close the tray, and then Control left arrow to open and close the tray. So those are also in the hotkeys. But most importantly, what I love about this UI is ideally when I'm working and not doing streams, I close these trays. I go to document, I set new document big, so it gives me full screen space. And instead of having to spend as much time going back and forth to trays, I made my own little, I call this my Sir Scallywag toolkit, and I press the 2 key. And, it looks like, let me just config, restore custom UI. Oh, that's strange. It looks like it just actually broke it. Well, clicking too many buttons. Let me just go back to that here in a second. But the 2 key, basically what that does, I've got a bunch of menus. So I'll come back to that. Steve Z, you're asking if there is a free 3D modeling software like ZBrush you can dabble with the arts of 3D. You just upgrade it. You should check out our trial. We have you can get right into ZBrush. Let me pull up the pages here for you. Yeah, and Jirim, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Jirimitis. You were asking about UI colors. Yeah, I did. So I changed these colors a while back, and I've stuck with them ever since. This is actually, this is such a nerdy thing to bring up here, but the color scheme, the blue and this sort of like orangish yellow, is the color scheme to Poe Dameron's X-Wing from Force Awakens. So I pulled those colors from the image and I've dropped it in here, and I've left it ever since because I love them. Okay, hold on one second here. Let me just get my ZBrush loaded up. And while, actually, what you can do, let me just go to launch ZBrush. Yeah, I wouldn't. No, it's okay. No worries, Stevesy. I definitely wouldn't. Of course, I can't recommend anything, and I wouldn't, to be perfectly fair. But if you check out our trial, you can just Google the Pixologic trial. It's 30 days. You have full access to the version. If you're interested in just getting into a more simplified version of ZBrush, we also offer a version of ZBrush called ZBrush Core, which is not as much of the bells and whistles. A lot of the stuff I'm showing here you can't do, but it has all the basic stuff for sculpting. You could try out we have subscription versions of that for $10, and ZBrush Core subscription. Let me see if I can pull this page up for you. Yeah, $10 a month if you want to give this a try. And this, from here you should be able to get access to the cart for all the versions, or the trial if you need to. But ZBrush Core, I'm doing streams on Core next Tuesday. So I'm doing this one every other week. Next Tuesday I'll be on using ZBrush Core, just sculpting a character, and that will be at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So myself and one of our other developers, Dice K in Japan, we're focusing ZBrush Core streams. So we're the only ones as of right now doing streams just using that version, which is just a simplified version again. Yes. Okay, so then let's go back here. Just getting totally derailed with these topology base. Okay, so you guys saw me before. I built this little topological piece. That's pretty much it. Now, I'll leave this as is so we can speed this up. And I'm just going to go in here and use the brush slide option in ZModeler. So what I was saying with the custom UI is when I press the 2 key, it brings up, I made a bunch of custom palettes. Now, some things might be broken in here. I may need to update a better version. The one I really use the most is this top one, Modify Topo. So I can have my document closed. I can do new document, give me that full screen space. And let's just say I want to do delete hiddens. So I can click to, this has got delete hidden, split hidden, all the split stuff, welding points, closing holes. I have split and merge essentials, like merging down if you need to get into that stuff. Polygroup essentials, auto groups, like group by normals. These are the buttons. But again, I use Control-Shift-9 to do group by normals, Control-Shift-P to auto group, and then Control-Shift-W to mirror and weld in the x-axis. Those get me pretty far. I don't have to do too much. And then, of course, all the other stuff I like to use in my little tray at the bottom. I've seen even crazier UIs. I see a lot of people just clutter stuff around. I like to keep it as simple as possible. These are like the most essential things I use, but you can get really crazy with those custom UIs, that's for sure. Okay, so then going back to this part, what I want to do is I want to just play around with, probably running out of time here, but I want to just do some Nanomesh stuff. So let's go do a cube. Let's go grab the polycube here. I'm going to set this to one subdivision, in each axis. I always like to start in this technique. I like to start with, oh, whoops, let's try this again. Make sure this thing is oriented correctly. There we go. Oh, this again. Oh, I did that quick save forever ago. I should have started with that. Oh, well. Start with one thing. Let's scrunch this thing down. Delete this edge loop. And then do brush, insert mesh new, brush, create Nanomesh. And I'll go back to that base. So starting off, just clicking and dragging, holding the shift key. Now I get these things drawing on each of those polygons. I'm going to go to Nanomesh here. And again, I think I'm going to tell it to fit. And I'm going to set that size to 0.9. And then I'm going to set that Z rotation to 0. So now it should match those polygons. Now you'll see you get some of these, sometimes some of these faces don't match or align correctly. So if you go into the align section, if you toggle through these alignment options, you can change the way that it aligns. So you see changing it, aligning to long edge here is going to match those guys perfectly. And sorry guys, you're just talking about the gold line. Yes, so the gold line is topology when you're building it. So if you have this thing set up in the edit topology phase, it's going to be gold. And when it's generated, in this case, I've actually completed or created this piece. So this is generated topo that when I turn on polyframe, you see the polygroups and you see the edges here. And this is, yeah, so it's Steve Z. If you're unfamiliar with ZBrush, this is all ZBrush terminology. So a polygroup really just refers to when you turn this button on, it turns on a color group on the polygon surface, on the surface itself. So pressing Control W gives it different colors. If I go into this brush, if I do Alt click and I select, I can assign a different polygroup color. The benefit is that when I say do an extrusion, I can extrude this polygroup, but not these ones. Or I can extrude this one and not these ones. So these are just default, sort of ZBrush words and terminology that you'll get accustomed to if you spend the time. And if you start with ZBrush Core, I will recommend this, or for the trial rather, Z Classroom. How to start in ZBrush. I did a full series on this, and let's just go in here. Oh heck, let me just go in and do my, let me just load this up since we're getting closer to the end. Shark Boy, let's just go grab the final scene here. So this whole series, if you download the trial, I made this specifically for trial users to actually go through and just make something. And it's very basic from the beginning, just going through practice sculpts. I'm sending you the link here to the scene. And while it's loading, Byron, you were saying topology brush, and no, I did that with Z for topology, which Saeed has referenced there. And essentially, you could do it with topology brush if you wanted to. So this whole thing was basically just creating a full character in ZBrush. So this whole series is going through and just building a character, posing it, sculpting it, making all the parts. It's about 12 parts or so. I'll send this to you. There you go. That's hosted on YouTube as well as our Z Classroom page. So it's going through just the basics, and that's essentially what we recommend for anybody just to get started. It's, you can follow along. It may not be necessarily something that you'd want to make, but it is a great way to just kind of go through the basics and learn the terminology and all that good stuff. So like that final, actually, I want to do, I'll show you just a quick final render for that one. Yeah, so this was like the final piece, just doing those parts and doing a quick keyshot render. Yeah, you're very welcome. All right, so then let's go back to that quick save here. Thanks for the compliments. I appreciate that. You're saying that it's all as Flash Player files. They don't work for most browsers. If you have those, okay, well those are hosted through Wistia, which should be fine. But let me just go to this. If you do how to start in YouTube, we also hosted these on YouTube. So let's go part 1. And these are now listed as a playlist. So I'll paste you this link here from YouTube. And that should take care of it if you have issues with the player. Oh, whoops. Okay. All right, so anyways, leaving that aside, I lost my topology here. Yeah, so this was Z-sphere topology building on top of the car. What's up, John? What's going on? All right, now I just need to set up my cube again one more time. And let's go brush, create Nanomesh brush, shift click, get these guys lined up. Set that rotation to off, fit 0.9, so I have a little bit of a border, and then let's go do the alignment to long edge, and there we go. Okay, so then I wanted to have just like a little sort of like metal sort of frame piece. So this one going into the edit mesh. Now I'm going to go into ZModeler. Let's do polygon, inset, region, alt click, and then click and drag to inset those. And now I just alt click to select and then click once to reapply. And now I can go to QMesh and I can punch these holes through. So now you get this frame, and then let's turn edit mesh off. So you get this. All right, so I get just like a nice little sort of metallic wireframe. It's like a base just for its, you know, some shapes underneath the hull of this car. And I'll do inventory, one to mesh. Now I want to go through and I'm going to control shift click to grab these parts, control shift A to grow all, and I'm going to do modify topo, split hidden. So I'm just breaking off this piece from the topology. All right, so let's call this like body details 1, and that'll be on. Now I may need to go in with that move brush, hold the alt key, and just pull this out just a little bit. Most likely that topology just was sitting underneath that surface just a tiny bit. And so I got a nice little base layer of detail, and I want to start layering stuff on top so this all looks nice with just exposed surfaces inside. Byron, you're saying today's my day for noob questions. Where is topology? Yeah, sure, no problem, man. I'm sorry I didn't, because I went through the issues with the file. Let's do this real quick. So I want to take the best, I would say, I recommend following these steps. With the car, I'm going to click clone. So I'm going to clone this thing off into its own tool. And then clicking insert, I'm going to bring in a Z-sphere. So by having a Z-sphere in the same tool as the car, we want to click the W key with Z-sphere and click and drag to move it to the center of the object. And with that Z-sphere selected, you go down in the tool palette to topology, and you click edit topo. So by doing this setup right here, you have the sphere inside the object, and when you click edit topo, it's referencing this object here as something to actually draw on top of to get the curvature of. So then once you're in edit topo mode, you're using the draw mode here, and when you press the X key, that turns on symmetry, so it'll build this topology on both sides. And with draw mode on, essentially you click to add a point, click again to add a second, again to add a third, again to add a fourth, and then close to create one polygon. And then you can create more polygons as you keep building. So let's go. And then, of course, so one thing to mention is you see as I rotate and I pan and move, I lose the selection of those points. So if you hold Control and click on a point, this gives it a starting point to build from. So this means when I select this one and I click this one, it's bridging from here to here. Now this one is currently selected and it's going to build from there, or rather the red one is always the one that's selected, and that'll put that in place. And then one thing to take note of here is the move mode here. I click the W key. W and Q will toggle between draw and move. When move is on, if I click and drag on a point, I can reposition and move these along the surface. But the benefit is it's drawing it just like topology brush, but drawing it on top of that surface. And then, so this is different than topology, whereas you can actually click to add individual points. Topology is more drawing along a curve. And then let's turn Q or draw mode back on, Control click here, and then keep building these polygons. And I'll probably do, you can also, if you Control click, you can add a point between 2 points. So you can click to add one here, click to add one here, here, and here. And then now we can move that around and put this edge there. It is like Quadra Maya. This is the exact same, the same fundamentals. So the only difference between this and Quadra is you're manually building topology. It would be the same thing as using TopoGun or any other program. 3ds Max has topology tools. Maya's Quadra tool is a very great topology tool, and it offers the ability to click points and then hold shift to click to bridge the gap between it. So the only difference is the functionality. Here we're clicking to create the 4 points, and once you close it, it creates the polygon surface. Now while you're in this editing stage with the topology, if we click solo, this is only going to show the Z-sphere. So there's a reason why we have to have the Z-sphere selected, because the Z-sphere is what's allowing us to build the topology. Without it, we can't do it. So when you click solo, you're seeing the Z-sphere and the topology that you've built. Now, if you go to Adaptive Skin and you click Preview, it's going to show you the mesh. Now, the problem is that right now with Preview, we have a couple things running. So if we're going to turn this off, we're going to set Dynamesh to 0. So basically what Preview is doing is Dynameshing it and adding a subdivision. So Dynamesh is off, we'll click Preview, and now what you'll get is the mesh, but you'll see density is up to 2. So it's taken the base mesh and it's subdivided it once. So if I set this to 1, you should see exactly the same thing. So this is the surface that we will eventually create. So while it's in this state, I'll turn solo back off. This is where we're going to keep building. So Control click, or actually let's go do this like up here. I think I did this as like a try in that previous build. So we'll just say that this is done for now. And then we click Preview. That's going to preview that surface, and then click Make Adaptive Skin. And that now makes a brand new piece. So you have to make the skin. And then basically I just made that part just like this. I went back to my tool. I went to Subtool. I did Insert, and I grabbed that skin, and I renamed this Topology or something. And now I have that in my scene. So that is how I built this piece. I just completed it all the way down underneath. Yeah, so Saeed is correct. Z-sphere is the key. That's the only way to do this kind of topology. So you're asking if you can start drawing randomly anywhere. It needs to be drawn on a surface. So if you just go in, say we delete this car, we go to this Z-sphere and we do topology. Let's do a solo off, and let's do adaptive skin off. Let's delete that topology and turn this off. So if I do edit topo and I just start clicking, you see I can't do any clicking. I can only click on an object. So basically right now I'm building topology on top of a Z-sphere, and this is the only way to do it. So you need a physical object as a reference point. So with topology, this is what pretty much people have done since the beginning, is in ZBrush you might sculpt something up in Dynamesh or something else, and then if you need to retopologize it for animation or something else, you then bring that head over to something else and you build on top of it. So in my case, I'm just using the car frame as my base mesh to build stuff, and I'm just creating topology on top of that. Rui's going crazy in the stream. I like it. Rui, if I don't see you, thanks for tuning in as always. And I'll see you next time. We betching, you're saying you mean on an object anywhere. Yes. So you can draw anywhere on the object. It doesn't have to be a sequence. So going back to, let's like clone this one off one more time. Insert sphere. Go topology, edit, and withdraw and symmetry. So let's say we do like one over here. You got a strip of topo going there. You could do another strip going here. And then if you go to adaptive skin, density at 1, Dynamesh off, click preview, you'll see you get separate shells. So they don't have to be touched. They will generate separately as long as they are quads. So if you turn preview off, let's just say we turn solo off and we do long quads or tries rather. So if you do, let's go do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we click preview. You'll see it will generate it, but you see when you do the preview, it's going to close off that shape. So it cannot have n-gons. We must have tries or quads. So ZBrush, if it sees that gap in there, it's automatically going to detect that and create a triangle in that space. Yeah, you guys are so welcome. I'm sorry I didn't clearly explain that earlier. And going back to that piece, so then this is where like I'll just finish this off with the stream here. The topology base, like this is where I want to play around with that Nanomesh a little bit more. So like say you want to put a bunch of tubes down here and you don't want to make each individual one, you kind of want to speed up the process. We could do ZModeler here. Let's just delete these edges so we get nice long strips. And in another tool, I'm just going to go, let's go start with the polymesh. Did I lose my star? Yeah, whatever. We'll start with like a cone. And for this, I'm going to turn on Gizmo. I'm going to grab the cylinder 3D. I'm going to give it a bunch of edges. And let's just duplicate this a couple times. So for this one, I'm going to go to that bend curve. Oh, and here's a little trick. So I just assigned it to this one. I want to do like 4 or 5 different pipes and tubes going in different directions. So if I have one right now with the gizmo applied, with the deformer applied, if I duplicate this, each of these duplicates is also going to have it applied. So they're all ready to go, essentially, as a starter. So now I could go in and let's just add a couple points here. Let's just go in and do something like this. All right, then we'll go to this one and let's do something in the reverse. Kind of smooth that out. Maybe add another point. So if you want these things to be overlapping, that's something you could play around with this sort of setup. And then let's go grab another. Maybe move this over. Add a few more points. Maybe this one I'll shrink down so it's a little bit smaller and thinner. And then I'll go in and click accept. Go to this one. Let's click accept. Go to this one. Make sure all these are accepted. And we'll leave these other guys. We'll just leave this as like just a quick test. All right. Yeah, we betching. Thanks. I appreciate the compliment, man. I'm glad to make you guys happy. That's what I'm here for. Trying to share the goods. Byron, you're saying this is wizardry? So like this, I'm trying to make just like a kit bash of like some wires and tubes. So I just made a few. You can go crazy with this. You can make a bunch of different parts, but I'm going to do or rather instance repeats. So if we take these guys, I'm going to do a merge down and then a merge down. So they are one subtool. Now looking at from the top view, so I'm going to go to brush, create insert mesh new. So I just made those parts, and now I'm just making insert meshes of this piece. Now, it's important in the way that you view this when you make insert meshes if you aren't aware. So viewing it from the top, when I click and drag it on a mesh now, it draws it the way that I see it. So if I rotate it like this, turn the floor off here, and we do brush, insert mesh new. Now when I draw this mesh, it draws outwards away from the mesh in the way that we captured it. All right, so we want this to essentially, just to kind of reference here, we want this to travel along the polygons underneath the car. So then what I'm going to do is go back here, make sure I'm viewing from this view, create insert mesh new, and now let's go into the topology piece, and we'll do, basically we can start by, we can alt click, or rather we need to make a Nanomesh brush now. So make the insert mesh, then make the Nanomesh brush, and then now let's hold alt and paint the faces that we want to do it to, and then click and drag, and we can draw these this way. Now, the angle in which they're traveling, if we go to Nanomesh, we can do alignment, and we can change the alignment here to match to those polygon edges. So short edge is what we want. And then here, if I go in, we can play around with Z rotation. Let's set that to 0. Or if the rotation is set to 0, then maybe the alignment needs to be changed. So rotation and alignment will change. If like rotation's at 90 and I click short and long edge, it's changing the way it's flipping that piece. So I always say set everything to zeros and then check your alignments to see if that helps. And then now we could do a little bit of like offset if we want that to go through. Another cool little trick, this sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, depending on the kind of repeat you're doing. But if we just do random distribution, you can randomly sort of disperse these guys in different places. Sometimes you'll get overlapping ones. But in this case, like I might just want to do, let's say we go to like length here. We can get a little bit of different length. You can add length variation. So you can kind of change this stuff slightly. And we could also do, yeah, after merging down, you can always split back again later. So that's one of the cool parts. So if we do something like this, and actually what I might do is let's undo this real quick. So I'm gonna take these pieces here. I'm gonna do I can copy these Nanomesh settings that I just did, and I'm gonna go to inventory. I'm gonna delete one. Now what I'm gonna do is insert some more edges in here. So insert single edge, single edge, single edge to give it more polygons. Now if I alt click these faces, draw this again, and then click paste, I'm pasting those settings that I had before. So I can kind of shortcut this, and now I get basically more pipes or more tubes traveling. And then let's just go in, and I just want to change that size maybe so it's converging through. Now you got a bunch of these pipes going. And here's the cool thing that we can do is now that we've got those things kind of traveling underneath, if you don't want as much of the repeats happening and you want to just like play around with the shapes, let's go to inventory, and we're going to click one to mesh. So it just generated those pieces. So before, if you don't generate it, it's just preview. So if you take a look at the active points, it's 74. The active points is accounting for this topology piece, nothing else. So it's not making these pieces. These are instances. But when you click one to mesh, you see now it goes up to 18,000. So it's actually making the physical geo. But then what I like to do here is if you go, let's say we just Control-Shift grab a bit of this topology, Control-Shift-A to grow, and we'll do Subtool split hidden. So you get these pipes by themselves. Now, if you do that little auto group technique, you go to polygroups, and we do auto group, you get a polygroup for each individual shell. The cool thing that we could do here is if we go to a move brush, for example, right now by default, if I just start moving everything around, it's moving it together. But if you go to brush, auto masking, and you turn on this mask by polygroups to go to 100%, what this means is each time I touch one of these polygroups, it only moves this one piece. So what I can do here is I can now go to the bottom, and I can start to like play around with each one of these custom shapes and just start moving things in a different way. So it registers whichever one you click first. It's noticing that it's touching one unique polygroup. And this is actually very easy to use, and it reacts very naturally. You have a great way to just kind of go through and select this and move it around. And then, Saeed, you're saying afterwards, if you want to split those off, you can go to Subtool. If these are auto-grouped, you could go to Split, and you could tell it's a group split, which is going to make a unique subtool for each one of these tubes. All right, so now I get all those together. And then I can go turn all those guys back on. All right, so you could pick and choose which ones you want. You can always split a piece of geometry off as a separate shell as long as it's not welded to another surface. That's pretty much the rule of thumb. If it's not welded, it'll split off perfectly fine. And even if it is, you could still split it. You just are going to have a big hole in your mesh. So you're asking, is it the same as the move topological? Move topological is actually looking at the topological surface itself. It's similar in nature, but different, if that makes any sense. It is similar, but it reacts in a similar way in terms of affecting certain areas and not affecting others. But this particular mask by polygroups is specifically affected by the polygroups themselves. So you have to have those polygroups. So the benefit of this is I like to have these. I don't want to have, if I have them split, I have so many subtools to deal with. So like to condense everything and have them merged, I can do all this, and I could even go in and do like control click and maybe just like play around with like just rotating or readjusting some of these things, and then going in with that move brush and kind of twisting and moving stuff around. So you could do this kind of stuff and really, change the way that you work and get really crazy with this. I like doing this. You could maybe in this case, what I probably wouldn't do is don't do anything as identifiable as a particular, like a nice repeatable curve like this. This is probably something that I shouldn't have. Like you could even go back to this one now and do polygroups, auto group, and let's just go in and like take this thing and maybe not, like, let's say delete this one, delete hidden. Let's turn these guys back on. Do a few less points. Probably scale this thing down. And don't do as much something that, so they don't all look so unique. We could just do a few of them. Oh, that's a little weird. Right, you just get some stuff moving in here. That way, when I go through and I make these guys together, it's going to be, let's do merge down. Oh, parts hidden. Oh, I got to get rid of those guys. Let's do delete hidden. Then we do brush, insert mesh, new, brush, create nanomesh. Let's go back to that thing and see if we can, or you could do multiple layers. Like this is another cool thing is you got those things going. Like maybe I'll do something like this. Here's where I start to get really crazy. So you got some tubes as one subtool. We can let's get rid of these perfectly identifiable curved tubes, like not have as many of them repeat. And then we'll do delete hidden. And then we'll go back to this topology. And let's do insert nanomesh for all these faces. And now we'll do another layer. And I did copy those settings from before. I could paste again. And they're still registered. And let's just align to short edge. And then here, now I'm starting to get more going. So I could do size a little bit bigger. Or this might be one to do like, you could try the random distribution. Like randomly populated, you get crazy stuff like this. And actually on that topic, I actually went through, this was something I did a while back. I did a stream on this. I guess I'll have to probably end this off today since I'm already going past my time. If you go to my, Let's get rid of this one, this one, this one. I'm going to share with you guys the stream link, and I'll also share with you my thread for this. Because I found that this technique actually works for a lot of pretty awesome things. I did a... Is it still here? It might not be here in the new ZBC. I need to port that back over. Let me go back to this stream video. It's got to be in my previous ones. Oh, right. So Nanomesh I was using for like Lego projects. So Lego, for example, let me just share this with you. This is another stream I did on using Nanomesh. Yeah, the Division Watch, that was that's an old one, but it was such a fun project. That was using more live Booleans and array mesh. But I want to show you this, Mr. Robot. I got in this kick where I wanted to do ZBrush scenes with Lego. So like I was doing a replica. I was doing a scene with Legos. I wanted to do like as if like, you know, like Lego movie has like real sort of characters or real people, like Batman. There's like Lego Batman. I wanted to do a version of that for the show Mr. Robot, which this isn't the final. I think I went into like this, like changing the textures around. But using array mesh and Nanomesh, this technique, I was able to get a lot of just populating the parts and pieces. So all this stuff is Nanomesh and array mesh and ZModeler to build the blocks and things like that. And that is covered in that stream link that I just sent you, just building some of these things, building some of those components and using Nanomesh and array mesh to do. But the one I wanted to show you was, see if I have it in here, doing Greeble. So if you remember Star Wars, the old Star Wars kitbashing sort of workflow, they would do different kinds of Greeble, so different kinds of hard surface elements. And using this, you could basically populate on like a sci-fi ship, for example, starting to populate, see if I can get an image here, populating just details like this with Nanomesh. And by the end of it, see if we can get a better sort of final version. No, it looks like I went on a tangent there. See if we can get like a clearer view of the front. Anyways, this stream, I'll paste this in there if anyone's interested, using Nanomesh to create greebles and nurnies on a surface that essentially gives you some pretty awesome surface detailing that is difficult to do in any other way, especially trying to do it in ZBrush and sculpt something like that. So that's there if you guys are interested. But I find this Nanomesh technique, just doing instances on polygonal surfaces, to get all kinds of really awesome workflow additions that you never would really try, but it's very fun and creative to actually use. Yeah, Nerb, cool. I'm happy to share some good tips with you, and thanks, Randy. I'm glad that this looks like something you were in need of. Yeah, check out it. I know that some of these streams are a little bit older, but if you go through some of the lists here, I cover all kinds of random stuff. I like to show Nanomesh, array mesh, ZModeler, the more advanced stuff as much as I can. And a lot of that's covered in these older ones with the Lego stuff. But yeah, this Mr. Robot scene was too fun. So all this stuff is in ZBrush, 100% ZBrush, and Keyshot to do the rendering. Even just trying to get like, I don't know, trying to get Lego movie quality with ZBrush and Keyshot was fun. It was a cool project. All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to cut this off. So that'll be the end of the stream. I'm going to probably these techniques I'm going to be using to complete all the rest of the stuff, Kitbashing, Nanomesh, all this good stuff. So I think in reality, where I'm at right now, I'll probably come back next time with this thing pretty much fleshed out. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about certain parts that I'll probably be building. But, oh, you know what I didn't get to today was this. I wanted to get to doing these like nice clean cut lines and grooves in that surface. We'll have to do that next time. But as far as building all this stuff, like trying to build these lights and everything, this is using ZModeler, just pretty much basic polygon modeling techniques. So if you're familiar with that stuff, it's a lot of rinse and repeat. So the techniques are pretty much there, but I want to flesh the rest of this out and have all these other components in there. Pre-drag, thanks as always. Comics Legend, thanks so much, man. I appreciate it, and you stay safe as well. Everybody, thank you all for tuning in, and I'm going to call it for this one and go get myself some lunch, go back to work. You're welcome. Thanks so much. I appreciate your questions, Weebetching, and everyone's engagement. I always appreciate all of your engagement. So thanks, and I'll see you all in 2 weeks for this stream. I'll be back next week at 2 p.m. Pacific time with ZBrush Core doing a character sculpt. So I'll see all you guys next time. Give me a follow if you guys are on. Let's go while you're still here. Let's go April 16th maybe. One second. Yeah, okay, here we go. So my Instagram, follow me here. I've sent you guys my ZBrush Central account. I'd love to follow you guys on Instagram. It's my personal account. Follow back. We can keep in touch. And my art account as well. And ZBC, please follow me on ZBC. If you don't have an account, make one, because it's a great place if you're coming to ZBrush Live to get resources. I'm using ZBC to post all my updates for this. So it's a great way for us to stay connected throughout the weeks when we're not streaming. Yeah, I'll see you next time, Saeed. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm going to get out of here, you guys. Take it easy. Everybody be safe. I'll see you next time.